Chapter 693. Yan Juexing looked up at the night sky and didn't know what he was looking at. Then he walked to the middle of the 7 stone basins. The 3 brothers of Xi and Laosan swept in 4 directions and stood still. At the same time, they looked around vigilantly as if they were guarding. The 7 naked girls walked towards the 7 arranged basins without feeling anything. One of them stepped into a stone basin, sat down, and lay on their side in the basin. Half of the basin was empty, and the other half was full of people. It felt a bit like the Taiji painting. The 7 basins were like plates with good dishes, and the girls inside were the dishes on the plates. Yu Qianqiu looked confused. He didn't know what Yan Juexing wanted to do. Under the starry sky, this scene looked like some kind of sacrifice. Did this jealous person want to sacrifice living people? After the 7 girls lay in the stone basin, Yan Juexing walked to a basin and took out a pot of 7-star blood orchid from the storage bag. He inserted one hand directly into the flower pot and dug out the blood orchid together with the soil. He carefully placed the empty flower pot outside the pot. Then he took out 6 pots of blood orchid and put them into the remaining 6 stone basins in the same way. When Yu Qianqiu saw the 7 pots of blood orchid, he was so angry that his teeth itched. Obviously, they were the 7 blood orchids that were bought from him. Although these 7 pots of blood orchid had grown very luxuriant, he was sure that they were his. The only thing that made him feel strange was that the flowers of the 7-star blood orchid were all white. Why were these 7 black flowers? He secretly pondered in his heart. It must be this jealous person who used some evil magic. Yan Juexing then sat cross-legged in the middle of the arranged stone basin. He looked straight ahead with cold eyes, and his body began to emit bursts of black mist. The black mist gradually spread and became thicker and thicker. It slowly enveloped the area within a radius of 10 meters. Yan Juexing's movement couldn't be seen at all. It was much thicker than the black mist released from his body before. Obviously, his demonic skills had made a lot of progress. A rolling black mist suddenly appeared in the valley under the starry sky. This scene looked a little strange, and an abnormal aura spread in all directions. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the water, couldn't help it. Now was a good opportunity. It was a good time to take advantage of the black mist to launch a sneak attack. But in the end, he still endured it. He wanted to see what this jealous person was doing. Maybe he could figure out what Lingfang Valley was conspiring with this guy. Suddenly, 7 spots of red light appeared in the black mist, shining and swimming in it. At the same time, the black mist tumbled rapidly and quickly retracted. Yan Juexing's seated figure appeared once again. In the blink of an eye, the black mist condensed into 7 balls. The 7 balls tumbled and gradually took shape, forming 7 seemingly solid black snakes. They were black flying snakes. The snake's head flashed and danced around Yan Juexing. Yu Qianqiu had never seen such a strange scene before. Just as he was secretly alarmed, he suddenly saw Yan Juexing sit still and say, "Go." The 7 black flying snakes bent their bodies and shot into the 7 stone basins with a whoosh, like arrows being shot from a crossbow. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the river, could see the blood splashing out from the 7 basins. His eyes immediately widened and his muscles tightened. He knew that the 7 girls were probably done for. He regretted not making a move earlier, but it was too late now. In order to find out, he bit his lips and resisted the urge to rush out. Because he was not only dealing with Yan Juexing, but also Lingfang Valley, who was known for their good reputation. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. He could only comfort himself and suppress the boiling killing intent in his chest. Yu Qianqiu was in a lower position, so he couldn't see what was happening in the basins. 7 bloody holes had appeared on the hearts of the 7 girls in the basins. Blood gushed into the stone basins like a fountain. More and more blood gathered in the basins, and the 7 girls became paler and paler. Their eyes slowly closed, and they fell asleep in their own pools of blood, never to open their eyes again. The roots of the 7-star blood orchid were soaked in the blood. It was as if they had absorbed the vitality of the girls and became more beautiful, the 7-star blood orchid had a miraculous effect. The sunflower could automatically correspond to the sun in the sky during the day, and the 7-star blood orchid could automatically correspond to the Big Dipper in the sky at night. In addition, its color was as bright as blood, and the smell it emitted was also the smell of blood, so it was called the 7-star blood orchid. Yu Qianqiu also knew the origin of the 7-star blood orchid's name. However, at this moment, the 7-star blood orchids in the stone basins were showing a miraculous scene. Bathed in the starry sky, the 7 small black flowers were moving slowly, corresponding to the Big Dipper in the night sky. On the hearts of the 7 girls who had died, the black flying snake drilled out of the bloody hole. It wandered in the pool of blood and slowly climbed to the edge of the stone basins. It just happened to circle around with its head and tail facing each other. It raised its head and hissed, as if it was waiting for something. Yan Juexing, who was sitting quietly, suddenly raised his arms and made a messy and complicated gesture. He shot 7 black lights into the 7 blood orchids, and then he chanted, "The light of the demon god, shine on the 7 stars. Remove the light, and take its magic. The flower of the blood demon, bloom brightly, and the magic of the stars, quickly absorb it." As soon as he finished speaking, the 7 small black flowers on the 7-star blood orchid suddenly trembled violently, and the thick smell of blood gradually spread around. After a long time, a majestic and unknown aura suddenly descended from the sky, and the entire valley gave people a very oppressive feeling in an instant. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the water, suddenly had a violent and uneasy mood. The light in the valley seemed to be a lot darker in an instant. Looking at the top of the 7 stone basins, there was a gray mist hovering 1 foot above them. It was getting thicker and darker. The 7 black snakes on the stone basins propped up their bodies and stuck their heads into the gray mist to greedily suck. Everything seemed so strange. Yu Qianqiu was still observing slowly at first. After waiting for an hour, Yan Juexing, who was sitting cross-legged, didn't move. He just quietly watched the 7 black snakes suck the gray mist with a smile. No. Yu Qianqiu's pupils suddenly shrank. He found that the 7 black snakes seemed to be slightly bigger than before. He immediately recalled the scene of Yan Juexing's body emitting black mist and condensing into a snake. The doubts in his mind were immediately dispelled, and his thoughts immediately became clear. The snake was originally condensed from the black mist released from Yan Juexing's body. Now, the snake was absorbing the gray mist summoned by the evil method to strengthen itself. In other words, Yan Juexing would also become stronger after absorbing the snake back into his body. This might be the secret of Yan Juexing's rapid cultivation increase. After understanding it, Yu Qianqiu immediately regretted it. He had sacrificed the lives of the 7 girls in vain. How could he sit back and watch Yan Juexing grow stronger? Walala! Countless black flying swords suddenly rose from the stream and shot out like a torrential downpour. This sudden movement startled the few people present. Yan Juexing even looked back in shock. He was a little dumbfounded to see so many flying swords suddenly emerging. At such a close distance, it was too late to escape. He quickly clapped his palms, and the 7 black snakes that sucked the gray mist quickly flew up and circled in front of him. They were like shields that bounced off the flying swords that were attacking Yan Juexing. Bang, bang, bang. There was a dense explosion sound on the beach. Although the flying snakes helped Yan Juexing to dodge the attack, the 7-star blood orchids in the 7 stone basins suffered a disaster. Not to mention the blood orchids, even the stone basins were shattered into pieces. My blood demon flower. Yan Juexing hugged his head and let out a shrill scream. He had never been so sad in his life. These 7 basins of blood orchids were the hope of his struggle. They were destroyed just like that. It was equivalent to destroying his hope. It was more painful than taking his life. It was simply heartbreaking. You dog, I can't even kill you like this. There was a curse in the stream. 2 bright small knives appeared in the hands of Xian Laosan and his brothers in an instant. It was similar to a guillotine used to cut herbs. 8 streams of light whizzed toward the place where Yu Qianqiu was hiding without hesitation. A figure immediately popped out from behind the stone in the stream, and at the same time, a group of dense black shadows exploded. Shio shio, sounds were like rain, and the 8 streams of light that shot over were directly smashed into pieces. The 4 brothers didn't hesitate to rush over and attack the figure that popped up in the air. With their cultivation at the end of the tribulation stage, they arrived in an instant. The figure opened his arms and shouted, "Absorbing Star's great technique." The others didn't know what the Absorbing Star's great technique was, but Xian Laosan could be said to be engraved in his heart. He didn't have time to say anything and could only hurriedly shout, "Run." He had already teleported back quickly. Maybe he was still worried, so he jumped into the stream to escape. However, the other 3 brothers were not so lucky. They had already entered the range of Yu Qianqiu's power. Before they could react, 3 clouds of white mist exploded in the air and rushed into Yu Qianqiu's sleeve. The 3 withered corpses fell to the ground with a thud. Yu Qianqiu landed firmly on the ground. The black flying swords that he had released earlier flew back from all directions, forming a dense defensive formation around him. Yu Qianqiu stared at Yan Zhuixing, who was holding his head for a long time, and snorted coldly, "Brother Yan, nice to meet you. It hasn't been long since we parted. I didn't expect to meet you here again." Xian Laosan's head popped out of the water. He stared at the 3 withered corpses on the ground and cried in pain, "5th brother. 6th brother. 7th brother." Although he was controlled by Yan Zhuixing and was loyal to him, he still had a normal mind. As long as it wasn't Yan Zhuixing's order, he could still distinguish between love and hate. He knew the pain of losing his brother. However, although he was sad, he was subconsciously afraid of Yu Qianqiu and didn't dare to come over. Yan Zhuixing slowly released his hand and raised his head. His eyes that were staring at Yu Qianqiu instantly turned red. He roared angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, it's you." Yu Qianqiu stared at the 7 black flying snakes that were quickly circling and flying to protect Yan Zhuixing. He squinted his eyes and said, "The demonic technique that you cultivate is really something. You can actually block my flying swords. Let's try again." Hundreds of black lights shot out like a torrential rain. Chapter 694. The 7 flying snakes moved like the wind and turned into 7 phantoms. Their speed was unbelievably fast and they were extremely agile. They protected Yan Zhuixing so that not even a drop of water could get through. Dang dang dang, after a series of explosions, Yan Zhuixing didn't move at all and continued to stare at Yu Qianqiu with hatred. "Damn you!" Yu Qianqiu cursed in disbelief. His attack didn't have any effect and the flying sword immediately rolled back to his side to protect him. The 7 flying snakes slowed down as well. They shook their heads and wagged their tails as they wriggled in the air. They looked at Yu Qianqiu with ferocious expressions and their eyes shone with a frightening red light. To be honest, Yu Qianqiu had always been very confident in his black fire flying sword. It was invincible and it had long become his trump card. Until now, most of the experts who had died in his hands had died under the black fire flying sword. He didn't expect to meet his nemesis today, 7 treasures. Yu Qianqiu's eyes revealed a look of envy and he wanted to take them for himself. The flying sword was dead, but the 7 flying snakes were alive. Regardless of speed or agility, the flying sword couldn't compare to them. What was rare was that they were very sturdy. Even the sharpness of the black fire flying sword couldn't hurt them at all. Looking at the scene of them growing stronger by devouring them, it seemed like they could even level up and evolve. Damn! However, Yu Qianqiu also knew that he could only envy Yan Zhuixing. These 7 flying snakes weren't real animals that could be tamed. They were formed by Yan Zhuixing's demonic technique. Yu Qianqiu, you deserve to die 1,000 times. Yan Zhuixing gritted his teeth and spat out word by word. The sound of his bones cracking could be heard. Deserving of 10,000 deaths. Yu Qianqiu's eyes fell on the pools of blood on the ground. Even the girl who was still in a coma was smashed into pieces by his flying sword. His heart slightly tightened, and his expression turned cold. He stared at Yan Zhuixing and said in a deep voice, "Last time, we didn't decide the winner, but but you ran away with your tail between your legs. This time, don't run away if you have the guts. Let's see who will die first. Do you really think that I'm afraid of you and will run away? Yan Juexing sneered with a face full of resentment. I'm only interested in the hero behind you and want to subdue him for my own use. That's why I didn't kill you. I didn't expect you to be so arrogant that even my demonic eyes couldn't control you. Now, you've even destroyed 7 of my blood demon flowers. Humph. Now that you know my secret, how can I let you leave alive? Yu Qianzhou's pupils shrank. He didn't expect Yan Juexing to know that he was related to Hero. But thinking about it, it made sense. Back in the 100 Flowers Valley, he had used Hero to frame the father and son. Others might not know, but the person involved must know. It wasn't strange for him to guess that Hero was related to him. Don't brag too early. It's still uncertain who won't leave alive. However, I definitely won't die. Do you believe me? Yu Qianzhou smiled sinisterly. He had Utopia as his final trump card. Even if he couldn't defeat Yan Juexing, he was confident that he could escape. Therefore, he believed that he wouldn't die. Yan Juexing sneered in disdain. Do you really think that you're the #1 expert below the soul formation stage? You'll naturally believe me after I beat you up. Yu Qianzhou smiled sinisterly. Suddenly, he changed the topic and sighed. On account of us being old friends, I'll tell you a piece of unfortunate news. Your father, Yan Bugui, really can't come back anymore. Because of your sins, he was killed on the Everlasting Island. What a terrible death. Not only was he dismembered into pieces, he was even thrown into the sea to feed the fishes. Brother Yan, you have to hold on. Nonsense. Yan Juexing roared fiercely. A faint murderous aura began to float out from his body. However, looking at his dazed expression, he seemed to have more or less believed it. Thinking about it, he was being hunted by various countries. How could his father, who was with them, have a good ending? Now's the time. Yu Qianzhou raised his brows. Hundreds of flying swords shot out while Yan Juexing was dazed. However, the 7 flying snakes that were protecting Yan Juexing seemed to have a mind of their own. Without Yan Juexing's control, they would automatically protect their master. It danced rapidly and bounced off the incoming flying swords with clanging sounds. Yan Juexing came back to his senses and said indifferently, "Is that all you've got? Burn your mother." Yu Qianzhou cursed. The flying swords that he shot out exploded. The surging black flames instantly engulfed Yan Juexing and the 7 flying snakes. However, there was no response from the inside. Yu Qianzhou's expression changed. Thinking back to the scene at the saber drawing assembly, he cursed in his heart. This guy really isn't afraid of the black flames. Sure enough, Yan Juexing's disdainful snort came from the black flames, so that's how it is. It's the same as the broadsword, condensed from fire. It can be considered a mystical technique. It might work against others, but it's useless against me. In the surging black flames, a figure slowly walked out. There were 7 pairs of red lights circling around him. Yan Juexing calmly walked out of the flames. Coupled with the indifferent expression on his face, he looked like a demon that walked out of hell. Yan Juexing stood at the edge of the black flames. He stared at Yu Qianzhou and snorted. He slowly opened his arms and took a deep breath. The surging flames quickly rolled over and entered his nostrils and mouth like a whale sucking in water. The most terrifying thing was that his face was filled with a comfortable expression. The 7 flying snakes around him were also greedily sucking the black flames. The netherworld ghost flame actually became their tonic. Yu Qianzhou was dumbfounded. He couldn't let them take advantage of him. He stretched out his palm and the surging sea of flames was quickly retracted into his sleeve. He could clearly feel that it had lessened a lot. Insignificant skill. Yan Juexing snorted in disdain and said indifferently, "Kill him." The 7 flying snakes shot out without hesitation. Yu Qianzhou naturally wouldn't just sit and wait for death. The flying swords around him immediately danced like a group of demons as they desperately blocked the 7 flying snakes. A series of clanging sounds rang out. The flying snakes weren't afraid of the flying swords that were burning with black flames at all. They shook their heads and wagged their tails as they charged forward with malevolent expressions. Their auras were ferocious and exceptionally valiant. The black flames' flying swords couldn't stop them. It was like scratching an itch on their bodies. It could only slow down their speed. Fuck. This is really troublesome. Yu Qianqiu suddenly had a feeling that he had nowhere to use his strength. These strange flying snakes couldn't be destroyed no matter how he slashed at them. They had a body full of skills, but he couldn't do anything to them. If he couldn't even deal with Yan Zhuixing's snakes, what was the point of fighting him? If he was forced to run away by a few snakes, then he would lose a lot of face. Just as he was thinking of a way to deal with them, the 7 flying snakes that were entangled by the flying swords suddenly sped up. They were like arrows that were released from a bow as they quickly launched a surprise attack. Yu Qianqiu was shocked and quickly dodged. Suddenly, he felt a tight grip on his wrist. There was a slippery feeling as if he was being strangled by a strong force. He couldn't dodge nimbly anymore. He quickly glanced around and was instantly shocked. He saw a flying snake had already wrapped around one of his arms. It opened its bloody mouth and was about to bite his hand. Right at this moment, his limbs tightened, and a huge pressure came from his waist and neck at the same time, almost suffocating him. Yu Qianqiu, today is the day you die. Yan Zhuixing's cold laughter echoed in the valley. Just at this moment, the valley suddenly shone with a dazzling green light. The entire valley was dyed in a bright green color. Hiss, hiss. A few shrill hisses echoed in the valley. At the critical moment, Yu Qianqiu, who was about to be bitten by the snakes, suddenly burst out with a ferocious green flame. The 7 flying snakes wrapped around Yu Qianqiu's body immediately emitted intense white smoke. They were shrinking at a visible speed. The flying snakes shook their heads and hissed in pain. They stopped entangling Yu Qianqiu and quickly retreated. In the blink of an eye, they were out of the sea of green flames. They hid beside Yan Zhuixing. Their bodies were much weaker. They trembled and looked at the ball of green flames in fear. Someone in the azure flame let out a strange, sound. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the azure flame, looked at himself in surprise. It seemed that even he didn't dare to believe what he was seeing. He had released the green flames out of instinct to protect himself. He had already made preparations to return to Utopia, but he didn't expect the green flames to have such a miraculous effect. Yu Qianqiu originally thought that even the powerful black fire couldn't deal with the snakes and that he was already at his wit's end. Who knew that the green flames, which were much weaker than black fire, could restrain them? Indeed, everything has a nemesis. How strange. Yu Qianqiu, who was in the green flames, immediately burst out with a strange cackle. He looked no different from a devil or monster, and his laughter was abnormally insolent. The surrounding black flying swords all disappeared into the green flame with a whooshing sound. Then, a large number of green flying swords appeared and danced around the floating green flame. It was a breathtaking sight. Yan Zhuixing looked at the 7 flying snakes in astonishment and revealed a pained expression. Yu Qianqiu's fire made his heart feel like it was being cut by a knife. The flying snakes were connected to his cultivation. If the flying snakes were damaged, it was equivalent to his cultivation being damaged. How could he not feel pained? Yan Zhuixing, hand over your life. Yu Qianqiu shouted wildly. Now that he had the upper hand, he didn't plan to let Yan Zhuixing off even though he was just about to escape. He waved his arms, and a sky full of green swords rained down. It was as if they wanted to turn the ground into a sieve. The 7 injured flying snakes rushed out to block and protect their master. However, their nemesis was their nemesis. The green flames flying swords weren't as sharp as the black fire flying swords, but they were extremely sharp against them. There was almost no sound. With a whooshing sound, the 7 flying snakes were immediately cut into pieces, like eels being chopped up on a chopping board to be cooked. Yan Zhuixing was alarmed. He clapped his hands, and his body suddenly split into 3 like smoke, dodging the gaps of the green sword rain gently. 3 shadows that were as light as smoke swiftly devoured the snake fragments that were scattered in the air. Immediately after, they spun thousands of times in the rain of green swords, broke free from the net of swords, and charged straight at Yu Qianqiu. Chapter 695. Yu Qianqiu could not help but gasp. With such a dense rain of swords, even an expert at the end of the tribulation stage would lack the space to teleport. This fellow's body that had split into 3 was actually as soft as a flowing cloud. It could be long or short, flat or wide, and it could even twist like a fried dough twist, slipping through the narrow gaps of the net of swords. He had always thought that this was an illusion technique, but looking at the situation, it seemed that the 3 shadows were the real body. As expected of a demonic technique, it was really strange. Without much time to think, the green flames surged to protect his body. The flying swords that were shot out quickly turned around and shot back with Yu Qianqiu as the center. Yan Zhuixing originally wanted to forcefully break through the sea of green flames and take Yu Qianqiu's life. But when he got close, he immediately realized that the temperature of the flames was frighteningly high. Actually, the high temperature was secondary. He could use the domineering demonic technique to force his way through. But the scary thing was that when he got close to the green flames, the demonic aura in his body actually showed signs of not flowing smoothly. The speed of his movements and attacks slowed down a lot. Thinking of the scene where the 7 spiritual snakes were easily cut apart, Yan Zhuixing was shocked. The demonic technique that he was so proud of was actually restrained by the green flames. The closer he got, the slower the demonic aura in his body circulated. His speed slowed down, but the flying swords behind him sped up and shot back. The flying swords were shot out in a spread pattern, and they flashed back through the gaps. Now that they were shot back, it was conceivable that the gap in the middle was much narrower than when they were shot out. In addition, the speed had slowed down. Yan Zhuixing was almost scared out of his wits. Even if the spiritual snakes were cut apart, as long as the body was still there, he could reform it. But if his body of flesh and blood was cut into pieces, he would lose his life. In front of him was Yu Qianqiu's sinister smile. Even if he was furious and wanted to tear him into pieces, it was not as important as saving his own life. The faces of the 3 phantoms were almost indistinguishable. They quickly broke away from the sea of fire that was pressing towards them. Like drifting clouds and smoke, they made hundreds and thousands of turns and narrowly passed through the green sword net. Yu Qianqiu was amazed. This demonic technique was really too magical. It would be great if he had the chance to practice it. However, as soon as he recalled the tragic deaths of those girls, he immediately dispelled that thought. He didn't think that he was a good person, but as a man, no matter if he was despicable or shameless, good or bad, he had to have something in his heart that could support the heavens and the earth. There were things that he could do and things that he couldn't. Only then would he be worthy of being a man. As soon as the 3 wisps of green smoke left the sword net, they immediately combined into one on the way back. Yan Zhuixing's original body immediately appeared in the air. However, his current image was a little too horrible to look at. There was no trace of her hair crown, and nearly half of her long hair had been shaved off. Her clothes were tattered, and it was unknown how many cuts there were on her body. Fortunately, she was not injured. It could be seen how much of a risk he had taken to escape just now. He had practically brushed past the edge of death or serious injury to escape. This was all thanks to the miraculous demonic arts he had cultivated. The entire valley was dyed with green light. The stream reflected the green light, like a green jade belt. Third brother Xian, who had his head above the water, was dumbfounded as he watched the 2 fight. This was a fight that he had never seen before. Both of them were using strange techniques. It couldn't be said that the winner had been decided yet, and he didn't know who would win and who would lose in the end. Yan Zhuixing, whose clothes were tattered and hair was disheveled, gnashed his teeth as he checked his body. He shouted angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, I won't forgive you. Use your brain before you speak. Look at yourself now. You're like a stray dog. Who is the one who won't forgive who?" Yu Qianqiu, who was in the sea of fire, suddenly said, "I almost forgot. You were originally a stray dog." In order to escape, you didn't even care about your mother and sister. Now, you don't even care about your old father. I think you'll have to hide for the rest of your life. You'll be a dog that can't return to its home for the rest of your life." These words made Yan Juexing tremble in anger. His eyes instantly turned blood red. His body faintly emitted a black light and a majestic killing intent rose. His chest swelled up and he suddenly spat a mouthful of blood on his palms. He clapped his palms and rubbed them together. In an instant, layers of red blood spread out from his palms. The faint red light enveloped a radius of nearly 10 meters. It was like a treasure light covering his entire body. Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank. He immediately became vigilant and his flying swords formed a formation to protect himself. Yan Juexing's strange techniques were simply unimaginable. He couldn't help but be careful. "Pa!" Yan Juexing clapped his palms again and chanted in a deep voice, "Blood demon armor." The red light within a radius of 10 meters quickly shrank. In the blink of an eye, it was like a red armor covered his body. In addition to that pair of red eyes, he looked like a monster. It was terrifying to look at. The first to strike is the strongest, and the second to strike will suffer. This was the truth that Yu Qianqiu believed in when he was killing people. He waved his hands and hundreds of flying swords shot out crazily. "Shoot the motherf asterisk cur first." Demonic light glimpse. His voice echoed in the valley. Yan Juexing's body suddenly disappeared from the spot. Xiao! An unbelievably fast red light directly collided with the rain of green swords shot out by Yu Qianqiu. The speed of the flying swords paled in comparison to the speed of the red light. It was like child's play. The speed was almost the same as teleportation. Peng peng. Rapid sounds of collision could be heard. A red light forcefully charged into the rain of swords, causing the green flying swords to be in a mess. In the blink of an eye, it broke through the rain of swords and arrived in front of Yu Qianqiu. The red light continued to charge into the sea of green flames. A fist was violently punched out, "Little devil fist." Yu Qianqiu vaguely heard these 3 words. The speed was too fast. The 3 words, "Little devil fist" and "demonic light glimpse," were almost superimposed together. The scene of Yan Juexing smashing the big black saber in cornucopia flashed in Yu Qianqiu's mind. He seemed to have heard the 3 words, "Little devil fist," at that time. If the big black saber couldn't do it, then he would use the big green saber. Although it was slow, it was actually fast. At the same time when Yan Juexing forcefully broke through the rain of swords, Yu Qianqiu struggled to raise a huge shining green saber. This saber was frighteningly huge. It was 4 to 5 meters long and more than 1 meter wide. Hi! The green light broke through the air and formed a green light screen, illuminating the entire valley. Yu Qianqiu held the saber with both hands and used all his strength to crazily slash at the red light. Bang! A loud sound reverberated in the valley. Countless scattered green light fragments were more dazzling than the stars in the sky, and shot in all directions like meteors. The tinkling sound of falling to the ground could be heard everywhere on the beach. The Duqing saber was instantly shattered by a powerful force. Pfft! Yu Qianqiu looked up and spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was shaken and flew backward rapidly. He felt that his internal organs had shifted and his stomach was in turmoil. His eyes were seeing stars and his ears were ringing non-stop. He didn't even know that he had been shaken and flew backward. He only felt dizzy as if the world was spinning, as if he was in a fog. The red figure that was rushing over also stopped for a moment. The red armor instantly collapsed. Yan Juexing, whose hair was disheveled, let out a muffled groan. His other hand was holding onto the fist that he had just punched out furiously. Bright red blood was dripping between his fingers. He pulled out the fist from his palm in disbelief. In fact, it could no longer be considered a complete fist, because half of the fist had already been cut off to God knows where, and the broken bones inside were clearly visible. The blood demon's armor and the magic ray glimpse were demonic techniques that he had cultivated recently. He didn't expect that they would be broken by Yu Qianzhou's saber the first time he used them. With Yu Qianzhou's cultivation, it was impossible for him to break these two sets of demonic techniques. The key to the problem was undoubtedly that big green saber. He was now 100% sure that Yu Qianzhou's green fire could restrain his demonic technique. He hated the fact that his demonic technique was still far from completion. Otherwise, how could a small green fire restrain it? However, that big green saber was also shattered by his own small demonic fist. Yan Zhuixing's gaze retracted from the green fragments around him and coldly stared at Yu Qianzhou. The injury on his hand didn't seem to have much effect on him. Yu Qianzhou, who was covered in green flames, fell onto a rock on the stream with a "pa" sound. It was the rock that he had been hiding on earlier. The green fire instantly retracted back into his body. Without anyone controlling the flying swords, they all fell to the ground one after another. Yu Qianzhou struggled a few times, but he couldn't stand up. So, he simply stopped moving. He sat on the rock paralyzed to recover his energy. His arms were behind his back, supporting his upper body. Blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth, but he still laughed and said, "Brother Yan, how was the taste of this saber?" "Brother, did I go too hard?" Third Exian, who was hiding in the river, jumped out of the water with a "hua" sound. He could also see that Yu Qianzhou was injured, so he wanted to take this opportunity to kill him. Yu Qianzhou suddenly turned around and sneered, "Third Exian, if you're not afraid of death, come and try. No matter how badly injured I am, taking care of you is still a piece of cake. You back off. This is between me and him." Yan Zhuixing waved his broken palm and stopped Third Exian. He stared at Yu Qianzhou and said in a deep voice, "I want to take his dog life with my own hands. Today, he won't be able to escape." "What a joke. You're just a stray dog." Yu Qianzhou sneered, "You're missing one part of your fist. Let's see how you're going to use the small demonic fist. There are many ways to kill you. Moreover, everyone has two fists." Yan Zhuixing slowly raised his other fist and shot down from above. He shouted angrily, "Small demonic fist." An intense wind from his fist swept over. Yu Qianzhou sneered, and the stream behind him suddenly surged up violently. The stream was immediately cut off, and the exposed rocks below could be seen. The water from above came crashing down again. Two huge water dragons directly hit Yan Zhuixing, who was pouncing over. A lump of ice appeared in the air in an instant, wrapping Yan Zhuixing inside and falling straight down. Yu Qianzhou quickly bounced off the stone and shot towards the lump of ice. But before the lump of ice landed on the ground, cracks appeared on it. With a bang, it exploded into countless pieces of ice, and a figure shot out. Actually, Yu Qianzhou didn't expect the ice to trap him. This kind of ice couldn't even trap a core formation stage cultivator, let alone Yan Zhuixing. But what he wanted was this buffer time. He slapped Yan Zhuixing in the air and shouted angrily, "Absorbing Star's great technique." Chapter 696. When these four words rang in the valley, Third Exian had the urge to run away. He looked at Yan Zhuixing, who broke out of the ice in horror, looking forward to his master's amazing skill to show its power again. However, Yan Zhuixing disappointed him in the end. He also saw the fierceness of the Absorbing Star's great skill again. Yu Qianzhou attacked with his palm. A cloud of white fog exploded from Yan Zhuixing's body, and the white fog drilled into the former's palm like a flowing cloud. Yan Zhuixing lost his momentum in an instant. His body instantly became thinner, and he slowly floated down, smashing into the ground with a thud. The valley instantly became quiet, as if everything was over. Finally, he got rid of this big trouble. Yu Qianzhou let out a sigh of relief. He floated in the air and stared at the pile of bones below him, laughing. He clicked his tongue proudly and said, "My Absorbing Star's great skill is nothing special when I don't use it. Once I use it, it will never fail." Dongfang Bubi was considered powerful in the past. Once he used the Absorbing Star's great skill, he still lost. Hee. Amazing. Third Exian was completely dumbfounded. Even when he was awake, he did not know who Dongfang Bubi was. There was only one sentence that kept reverberating in his mind. Master is dead. Huh? Yu Qianqiu, who was laughing and boasting himself, suddenly exclaimed in surprise. He seemed to have found something wrong. Logically speaking, a person who was hit by his absorbing star's great skill and had all the water in his body sucked dry should be smashed to pieces when he fell from a height of more than 10 meters. However, Yan Zhuixing's dried corpse, although it was already like a skeleton, was still standing there. It looked a little strange. At this moment, a ball of black light suddenly appeared from Yan Zhuixing's body. It spread out and quickly protected his corpse. As the ball of black light emerged, Yu Qianqiu suddenly sensed a terrifying aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. It was desolate, ancient, and the entire valley seemed to have instantly traversed through space and returned to the distant past. The unknown aura was so terrifying that it made people suffocate. It was so thick and powerful that it was indescribable. He was clearly looking down from the sky, but it was as if he was looking up at a towering, majestic mountain. It made his heart surge with emotions, but also filled him with endless trembling. The instant the black light enveloped Yan Zhuixing's corpse, the surrounding ice cubes all clanked and bounced on the ground. Yu Qianqiu and third brother Exan looked around in fear. Suddenly, with a so-so sound, with Yan Zhuixing as the center, the surrounding crushed ice quickly gathered and wrapped around Yan Zhuixing in an instant. Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank. He saw an unbelievable scene. The corpse wrapped in ice was rapidly expanding, as if it was absorbing the water from the ice to replenish its body. Damn it! This was too monstrous. Could it be that this dog couldn't be killed? In a panic, Yu Qianqiu clenched his teeth, and a trace of ruthlessness flashed across his face. He spread his arms, and all the green fragments and flying swords in the valley returned to his body. He clasped his hands together, and the green light once again illuminated the valley. A huge green saber that was 4 to 5 meters long appeared in his hand. Yan Zhuixing. I don't care if you're a human, a demon, or a demon. I don't believe in evil. I'll chop you into minced meat. Let's see how you're going to survive. Ah! Yu Qianqiu shouted. With a "hoo" sound, a green light flashed across the sky, and a crazy saber shadow slashed towards the figure in the ice cubes. Bang! The ice cubes suddenly exploded, and a figure emerged from the ice cubes. Immediately, he let out a shrill scream. Yan Zhuixing did resurrect, but unfortunately, he ran into Yu Qianqiu, who believed in eliminating the root of the problem. The moment he broke out of the ice cubes, he ran into the saber. He didn't even have time to dodge. His body quickly dodged, but he was still hit by the saber. Blood splattered, and the saber directly cut down from his shoulder. His entire arm was separated from his body, and his arm was sent flying on the spot. When Yu Qianqiu became ruthless, he was definitely a ruthless character. There was no such thing as mercy. What he wanted was Yan Zhuixing's life. How could an arm satisfy his desire? He shouted with a ferocious face, "Give me your life." The saber followed Yan Zhuixing's dodging body and chased after him. Yan Zhuixing, who had already lost a lot of vitality, desperately waved a little devil fist with his other hand and smashed it on the broad saber. With a loud dang sound, the saber was immediately shaken off. However, it seemed that he had the will but not the strength. He, who had lost a lot of vitality, had no strength to shatter the great green saber. He could only shake it off. Taking advantage of this gap, he quickly dodged and drew an arc downwards. When he was close to the ground, he grabbed the arm that was separated from his body. Yu Qianqiu's arm shook, and he realized that the power of Yan Zhuixing's little devil fist was far from what he had imagined. He immediately understood that this kid was too heavily injured and didn't have much lethality. In other words, now was the best time to kill him. He must not miss this opportunity. The terrifyingly large great green saber quickly slashed again. Yan Zhuixing, who was pale, stepped on the ground and used the momentum to retreat. The great green saber brushed past him, and he barely escaped this attack. Bang! The ground was slashed by the saber, and the gravel flew everywhere. Yu Qianqiu missed his attack, so he pushed the saber and quickly chased after Yan Juexing. He stabbed wildly at Yan Juexing, who was flying backward. The scene of him slashing madly made people speechless. Yan Juexing, who was exhausted, was immediately scared out of his wits. His pale face became even paler. Yan Juexing, who was dancing on the blade, immediately understood that Yu Qianqiu was now full of vigor, and he didn't have the strength to fight with Yu Qianqiu in his current physical condition. If he continued to waste time, he would only die. He immediately shouted, "Third brother Xian, go to Lingfang Valley quickly and steal your master's 10 pots of blood orchids at all costs." Hurry! Third brother Xian immediately flew away without hesitation, and the direction was Lingfang Valley. 10 pots of blood orchids? Even if I give you 10,000 pots of blood orchids, you won't have the chance to use them again. Today, I must chop you into minced meat and feed you to the dogs. I'll see how you can resurrect. Still want to run? Stop right there. Just give me a few slashes, and I'll give you a quick death. Now you know that I'm the number 1 master below the spirit severing stage. Motherf ****. Don't run. Yu Qianqiu kept scolding, and his hands didn't slow down either, slashing wildly. He wouldn't stop until he killed you. Yan Juexing, whose hair was disheveled and clothes were ragged, had a pale face. At this time, there was a morbid flush on his face. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and almost spewed fire. Under such a crushing defeat, he still had to suffer insults while fleeing in a hurry. No one could stand it. As long as one had a little bit of courage, it would be strange if he didn't fight desperately. At this time, Yan Juexing almost lost his mind after being scolded by Yu Qianqiu. He really wanted to rush forward and fight. Even if he could bite Yu Qianqiu, he would be willing to die. However, a trace of reason told him that he couldn't be impulsive. If he was impulsive at this time, he might not even have the chance to take revenge. Yan Juexing, who was fleeing in a hurry, stared at the broken arm in his hand. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. He originally wanted to use demonic arts to reattach the broken arm, but now it seemed that saving his life was the top priority. Escape! Yan Juexing, who was in the saber light, suddenly grabbed the broken arm and squeezed it. With a bang, the entire broken arm instantly exploded into pieces. In an instant, a large amount of blood mist appeared, making it impossible to see anything clearly. Not to mention Yan Juexing's strange behavior, when Yu Qianqiu heard that escape, he immediately felt that something was wrong. The cyan saber shadow immediately danced wildly in the blood mist. He roared angrily, "Yan Juexing, don't run if you have the guts. Whoever runs is a beast." The expanding blood mist suddenly collapsed and shrank rapidly, forming a blood scab that fell to the ground. The valley was restored to its original state. Yu Qianqiu, who was dancing wildly with the saber, stopped and saw that the surroundings were empty. There was no trace of Yan Juexing. He didn't even know where Yan Juexing escaped from. There was no sound of anyone leaving at all. Yan Juexing seemed to have suddenly disappeared. He didn't know that if Yan Juexing still had the strength when he was in the cornucopia, he would probably have died in the hands of Yu Qianqiu. However, during this time, Yan Juexing, who had used the 7-star blood orchid to successfully break through to the middle stage of crossing calamity, practiced a few demonic arts that he could barely dabble in, and saved his life at the critical moment. However, there was a special reason why he was magically resurrected after being hit by Yu Qianqiu's absorbing star's great technique. Perhaps even Yan Juexing himself didn't know how he came back to life again. What he used to escape just now was the blood escape from the demonic book, which was one of the demonic arts that he had just practiced. Normally, it would be very difficult to cultivate until the end of the tribulation, but because of his current difficult situation, he forced himself to cultivate and almost suffered the backlash of the demonic art. During the process, he endured unimaginable pain, but he stubbornly gritted his teeth and endured it. Practicing the blood escape was originally used to guard against masters in the soul formation stage, but who knew that he would be forced to use it for the first time by Yu Qianqiu? The use of this demonic art consumed a lot of devil aura, and it also used a lot of one's own blood essence as a primer. It was an escape method that was used as a last resort, and generally wouldn't be used easily. Demonic cultivators with high cultivation could use the blood escape to save their lives, and they could escape thousands of miles in an instant. The higher their cultivation, the farther they could escape, and it was very effective in saving their lives at the critical moment. However, with Yan Zhuixing's current cultivation and physical state, he couldn't escape far at all. The blood escape just now only escaped for about 10 miles. At this time, Yan Zhuixing was hiding in a desolate ravine, and even he didn't know where he was. His face was as yellow as gold paper, and his whole body was curled up on the ground. His whole body was trembling in pain, and beads of sweat the size of soybeans appeared on his forehead. He endured the pain, and told himself that he must not faint. Once he fainted, the smell of blood on his body would definitely attract the ferocious beasts in the deep mountains. There was no lack of ferocious beasts in the deep mountains. If he didn't die in the hands of Yu Qianqiu, but died in the hands of beasts, it would be too unjust. He held his shoulder that had lost an arm with one hand, and tried to sit up to recover. He gritted his teeth a few times, but he couldn't sit up. His body was too weak. In the end, he bit his lip so hard that blood came out, and the veins on his neck bulged. Ugh! He raised his head and let out a painful groan, and finally sat up. After panting a few times, he sat cross-legged with difficulty, and quickly treated the wound on his shoulder. He stopped the blood flow, and slowly entered a state of recovery. Chapter 697. In the empty valley, Yu Qianqiu flew quickly and searched the dense forest on 3 sides. However, even after searching several times with his eyes and divine sense, he could not find any trace of Yan Zhuixing. Thinking of Yan Zhuixing's escape, before he escaped, Yu Qianqiu flew up into the sky and looked around at the boundless mountains. It was easier said than done to find a person who was intentionally hiding in these boundless mountains. He could not help but feel a sense of powerlessness in his heart. He was afraid that the guy had really escaped. Not good. Yu Qianqiu suddenly exclaimed. He remembered that Yan Zhuixing told 3rd Xian to steal 10 pots of 7-star blood orchid from Lu Yanqing. Didn't he give 10 pots of 7-star blood orchid to Lu Yanqing? If those 10 pots of blood orchid fell into Yan Zhuixing's hands, the consequences would be unimaginable. 3rd Xian's figure had long disappeared from the valley. Yu Qianqiu did not hesitate to fly quickly in the direction of Lingfeng Valley. He increased his flying speed to the limit that his cultivation could control. He flew through the sky anxiously. In an instant, a figure went far away. The valley was a mess, the ground was a mess, and there were potholes everywhere. After a night of torment, the sky was already bright. There was a red light in the east, and the sunrise was imminent. The vast mountains retreated quickly below. Yu Qianqiu, who was flying at high speed, suddenly frowned and slowed down. With his speed, he definitely could not catch up with 3rd Xian, but this was not the most important thing. The key was that Lu Yanqing and Yan Zhuixing were basically a snake and a rat. There should be 2 spirit-severing experts in Lingfeng Valley. He had killed 3 of Lu Yanqing's disciples. Wasn't it courting death to rush there now? With his current cultivation, he was not a match for a spirit-severing expert. Bitch! Don't fall into my hands. Yu Qianqiu hit his fist heavily in the air. His face was full of regret. He regretted that he fell for that bitch's trick and gave her 10 pots of 7-star blood orchid. The most terrible thing was that he actually gave 100 charms and Yan Yu to her. Wasn't this asking for death? Now, he had no choice but to go to the Spirit Fang Valley. Not for anything else, but just to save the temptress and Yan Yu, he had no choice but to go there. However, charging in alone was not a solution. He had to find 2 experts to help him. No matter how he thought about it, he really didn't know who to ask for help. Baiwan Nation was close to this place, and Wen Lanfeng's cultivation was strong enough. But the key was that this guy had lost his soul to Lu Yanqing. It would be good if he didn't help, and he might even be in cahoots with her. It was bamboo making. He also had a good relationship with Lu Yanqing. He couldn't bring himself to ask his master to save his woman. If only Yin Bai Kong was still alive. After thinking about a lot of people, he still felt that they were not suitable. In the end, he thought about Pei Fong, Qi Zhejuan, and Ouyang De. In any case, those three fellows were rushing to flatter Hibiscus. He was prepared to use Hibiscus's name to invite these three monstrous experts. Otherwise, if an ordinary person heard that they were going to deal with Lu Yanqing, they would definitely be scared away by Wen Lanfeng. Huh? Yu Qianqiu was about to go to the Blue Palace when he suddenly became startled. His eyes flashed and he muttered to himself. Yan Zhuixing asked Third Xian to steal the 7-star blood orchid. Steal the 7-star blood orchid, why? Aren't they in cahoots? Not good. Third Xian and the others might have been controlled by Yan Zhuixing's devil eye. He reacted in a flash, but Third Xian had already left for a while, and he was afraid that he would soon reach Lingfeng Valley. At present, stopping Third Xian from stealing the blood orchid was the top priority. He suddenly became anxious and flew in the direction of Lingfeng Valley. Not long after, he suddenly slapped himself in the face and scolded, "Why am I so stupid?" He suddenly disappeared in the air. When he reappeared, he was already in the call where he first came to Lingfeng Valley last night. But just as he appeared, a figure flew over his head with a whoosh. Yu Qianqiu looked up and saw that it was Xian Laosan. Who else could it be? He didn't expect that Xian Laosan had arrived. He immediately jumped into the air and chased after him, shouting angrily, "Third Xian, don't run. Stop right there." Third Xian looked back and was immediately shocked. He had already flown with all his might, but he didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to still chase after him. Without saying anything, he shot toward the peak of Lingfeng Valley's medicine hut. As soon as Third Xian landed on the platform, he immediately rushed to the stone slab on the right side where the spirit herbs were placed. The 10 pots of blood orchids on the stone slab were all put into his storage bag. At this moment, someone suddenly shouted, "Who is the one pretending to be his father here?" A figure swept into the air from Medicine Hut Mountain. He was tall and thin, and he stared angrily at Yu Qianqiu who was flying over. This person was none other than 9th Xian of the Xian family, an early divine transformation cultivator of Lingfeng Valley. There was no difference between Yu Qianqiu pretending to be Third Xian's father and him pretending to be his father. Naturally, he was very unhappy. Third Xian, who was about to escape, suddenly had his eyes lit up. He cried out in pain, "Ninth brother, this person killed 5th brother, 6th brother, and 7th brother. He also stole Master's 10 pots of blood orchids. Quickly kill him." What? 9th Xian, who was in the air, was shocked. When he looked back at Third Xian, he saw that the 10 pots of blood orchids on the stone slab next to him were indeed gone. Third Xian was his brother, so he naturally believed what he said. As for the 7-star blood orchids being stolen by Third Xian, he would not even think about it. "Third Xian, your mother's bullshit." Yu Qianqiu cursed. Suddenly, he saw Third Xian sprang up and directly swept toward the dense forest behind the mountain. He immediately waved his hand and shouted from afar, You, stop him, don't let him escape." 9th Xian's face suddenly darkened. Isn't Third Xian's mother his mother? He teleported in front of Yu Qianqiu, who was chasing Third Xian. He waved his palm, and a strong wave of qi blocked Yu Qianqiu. If Lu Yanqing didn't hate fighting and killing, he would have already made his move. Damn it. If you don't want to chase, then get out of my way. Don't block me. Yu Qianqiu said in exasperation. Unfortunately, he changed his position several times, but he was forced to not move an inch by 9th Xian's palm. Little did he know that this was the consequence of his foul mouth. Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was not enough to catch up with Third Xian. Now that he was blocked, he could only watch helplessly as Third Xian disappeared into the distant mountains. He immediately flew into a rage and pointed at 9th Xian, shouting, "Who are you? Do you know that you are in big trouble? I am Lingfeng Valley's 9th Xian. Ninth Xian stared at Yu Qianzhou with murderous eyes and asked in a deep voice, "My third brother said that you killed my fifth brother, sixth brother, and seventh brother. You also stole our sect's spiritual herb, the 7-star blood orchid. Is that true?" Yu Qianzhou was startled. Only then did he remember that third Xian had called him ninth brother. It seemed that this person in front of him was another spirit-severing expert from Lingfang Valley. In the small courtyard, Lu Yanqing heard the commotion outside early in the morning. But because of her appearance, she never came out to see strange men. But when she heard third Xian say that fifth brother, sixth brother, and seventh brother were killed, she could no longer sit still. Her pretty face was frosty, and she slowly walked out of the house. But when she saw the person in the air who was confronting ninth Xian, she immediately said, "Yu Qianzhou. Why is it you?" After ninth Xian heard his master's words, he was also startled. He stared at Yu Qianzhou and looked him up and down. Then he said in astonishment, "You are Yu Qianzhou?" He was now a little suspicious of his third brother's words. With his master's eyesight, he certainly wouldn't recognize the wrong person. Since this person was Yu Qianzhou, and the master's 7-star blood orchid was originally gifted by him, why would he steal it back? Besides, third brother often talked about how good Yu Qianzhou was. Could it be a joke? In addition to third Xian's wild temperament, ninth Xian immediately confirmed his own guess. The haze on his face immediately disappeared. He cursed in his heart, "Third brother is too willful. How can he make such a joke? I am Yu Qianzhou." After Yu Qianzhou replied, his gaze fell on the woman on the mountain plain. She was wearing a green robe and looked familiar. That simple yet dazzling appearance made everything around her pale in comparison. He was afraid that in this world, there wouldn't be a second person as beautiful as her. She was more beautiful than the women he had seen in his 2 lifetimes. His heart immediately warmed, but at this time he was burning with anxiety. In addition, his impression of Lu Yanqing wasn't very good. How could he be in the mood to look at a beauty? After his eyes slightly brightened, he asked with some doubt, "You are Senior Lu of Spirit Fang Valley?" Ninth Xian secretly nodded his head in appreciation. The men who came to see his master, except for the terrifying old man from the demon ghost domain, were all stunned for a long time. But this Yu Qianzhou only revealed a trace of appreciation. He didn't lose his composure at all. He thought in his heart, someone who can be praised by third brother is indeed not someone ordinary people can compare to. Lu Yanqing was also somewhat surprised. This Yu Qianzhou was the second man who saw her true appearance and remained indifferent. Bai Changchun's taste in picking disciples was indeed not something ordinary people could compare to. Suddenly, as if he had found the long-lost feeling of being a normal person, he calmly nodded his head and said, "It's me. Yu Qianzhou, why are you chasing after my third brother?" No wonder the voice sounded familiar. It turned out to be Senior Lu. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and smiled bitterly. Looking at the direction third brother Xian disappeared in, he knew that he couldn't catch up. It seemed that he still needed the help of the people of Spirit Fang Valley. He immediately floated to the platform and cupped his hands in salute, "Greetings, Senior Lu. Senior Lu, please quickly send out all the people of Spirit Fang Valley to capture third brother Xian. We must not let him escape with the 7-star blood orchid. Otherwise, something big will happen." Ninth Xian flashed down and said strangely, "Yu Qianzhou, what did you say? You said that my third brother took away the 7-star blood orchid?" At this time, it was face to face. After seeing Lu Yanqing's stunning appearance at a close distance, Yu Qianzhou exclaimed, "Senior Lu is worthy of being the world's first beauty. You really can't be compared to ordinary people." It was just a casual compliment. Lu Yanqing just wanted to say a few perfunctory words, but she saw Yu Qianzhou turn his head and roll his eyes at ninth Xian. "Can I still lie? Just before you blocked me, I saw him take away the 10 pots of blood orchid with my own eyes. I asked you to chase after him, but you blocked me instead. What should I say to you?" Lu Yanqing's expression slightly stiffened. She swallowed the words that reached her mouth. She was really speechless. It was the first time that a man saw his true appearance and ignored her. Seeing him praise her appearance, she wanted to say a few perfunctory words. Who knew that the other party's attention was not on her at all, so she did not have the chance to be perfunctory. It seemed that he was praising her perfunctorily, as if he did not put her appearance in his eyes at all. Chapter 698. Impossible. Old Ninth Xian firmly denied, my third brother would never steal master's things. Who would have thought that Lu Yanqing would sigh softly? It was Lao Sen who took away the 10 pots of blood orchid. Xian Laojiu was in the belly of the mountain before, perhaps he did not notice. But Lu Yanqing was in the small manor, and as soon as Xian Lao Sen flew near, she noticed. Xian Lao Sen took away 10 pots of blood orchid. Lu Yanqing felt strange. Although she didn't know the reason, she didn't believe that Xian Lao Sen would do anything against her, so she didn't come out to stop him. Why didn't you stop him when you knew he took the blood orchid? Yu Qianqiu stared at Lu Yanqing and shouted. Xian Laojiu was startled at first, then he frowned and said, Yu Qianqiu, watch your tone. Yu Qianqiu was speechless, he couldn't wait to rush up and give Lu Yanqing 2 slaps. At this time, no matter how beautiful Lu Yanqing was, she became a pile of dog shit in his eyes. However, he knew that he was no match for the two of them, so he suppressed the anger in his heart and said in a deep voice, Senior Lu, something big is going to happen. Lu Yanqing stared at Yu Qianqiu with clear eyes, and there was a trace of doubt in her heart. She seemed to see a trace of disgust in Yu Qianqiu's eyes. She had never seen a man show such a look to her, and did not know when she had offended him. She frowned and said, Yu Qianqiu, what exactly happened between you and third brother? With a gloomy face, Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and said, Yan Zhuixing is hiding in your Lingfang Valley. You probably don't know about it yet, do you? Lu Yanqing and Xian Laojiu looked at each other in surprise. The former said strangely, this is not possible. How do you know that Yan Zhuixing is hiding in my Spirit Fang Valley? Although the two of them were surprised, they didn't seem to be disgusted by the fact that Yan Zhuixing was hiding in the Spirit Fang Valley. To the two of them, Yan Zhuixing had no enmity with them and was not involved in anything. So what if he was hiding in the Spirit Fang Valley? Hee. Looks like you guys don't care. Good. That's great. Very good. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the two of them and laughed angrily, wishing that he could engrave the word 38 on Lu Yanqing's seemingly beautiful face. Sometimes, beautiful things could be so hateful and unsightly, making people feel even worse. Xian Laojiu's face darkened as he shouted, impudent. Lu Yanqing raised her arm and stopped him from continuing. She said calmly, Yu Qianqiu, if you have anything to say, you can say it. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath, calmed his emotions, and said slowly, Yan Zhuixing is hiding in your Lingfang Valley to cultivate his demonic arts. His cultivation process is abnormally cruel, and he has sacrificed countless mortal girls' lives. Previously, I accidentally bumped into him and had a huge battle with him. He was severely injured by me and escaped. The 7-star blood orchid is the key to his cultivation of demonic arts. 4 of your disciples have been controlled by his demonic eyes and have become his puppet accomplices. Third brother Xian is one of them. What do you think he wants to do by stealing those 10 pots of blood orchid? What? Lu Yanqing and Xian Laojiu exclaimed at the same time. This time, the two of them could no longer calm down, and were even a little flustered. Yu Qianqiu still felt that the stimulation was not enough, and said with a sneer, I forgot to tell Senior Lu, of your 4 disciples, other than third brother Xian, 3 have already been killed by Yan Zhuixing. If you don't want third brother Xian to die, I advise you to quickly send people to search the entire Lingfang Valley. He has already been seriously injured by me, and I don't think he can escape too far for the time being. What? The two of them exclaimed again. Xian Laojiu lost his composure and said with a trembling voice, You said that Yan Zhuixing killed my 3 brothers? Yu Qianqiu naturally wouldn't admit that he was the one who killed them. He coldly said, I don't know if they were your elder brothers or not. I only heard third Xian call them 5th brother, sixth brother, and seventh brother. Whether they were your elder brothers or not, it's up to you. Xian Laojiu suddenly turned around and anxiously bowed to Lu Yanqing and begged, Master, whether it is true or not, please allow me to bring people to search. Bring all the people in the sect that can be used, and be sure to rescue third brother. Lu Yanqing said with a worried face. Yes. Xian Laojiu cupped his hands and quickly left. After a while, hundreds of people flew out of Medicine Hut Mountain, and swept into the mountains. Yu Qianqiu withdrew his gaze from the crowd, and stared at Lu Yanqing and said with a sneer, Senior Lu, don't you think that with the people of your Lingfang Valley, the hope of finding them in the vast mountains is very slim? I think it's better to find more people. The worried Lu Yanqing immediately came back to her senses, and nodded in a panic, I will contact Wen Lanfeng and ask him to send people. For someone like her who had almost never suffered any disasters, although she had experienced a long time, her ability to cope with sudden changes was really not good. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Although he heard that this woman had been rejecting Wen Lanfeng, it seemed that when she was in trouble, the first thing she thought of was Wen Lanfeng. However, Yu Qianqiu still felt that this was not safe. He was afraid that they would not be able to catch Yan Juexing if there were less people, so he immediately reminded her again, last time, so many people failed to catch Yan Juexing, and Wen Lanfeng's family is also difficult to deal with. I heard that Senior Lu has a wide range of contacts. For the safety of third brother Xian, it's better to invite people who can help. Lu Yanqing did not think too much, and nodded repeatedly, quickly flashed into the small courtyard, and used the communication array to invite people everywhere. Yu Qianqiu. Just as Yu Qianqiu looked down the mountain, he suddenly heard someone calling him. Looking at the sound, he saw Enchantress of Charm and Yan Yu looking at him at the entrance of the courtyard. The two had actually been inside, and as soon as Yu Qianqiu arrived, they knew it was him. However, seeing Lu Yanqing and Xian Laojiu, two experts of soul formation stage, they did not dare to come over and disturb him. At this time, seeing that the two experts of soul formation stage had left, they appeared and slowly walked over. Seeing that the two women were safe and sound, Yu Qianqiu's mood suddenly improved a lot. In particular, the plain clothes that the two women had changed into, although it covered their graceful bodies, it added a bit of a different kind of charm to them. Seeing this, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up, and immediately said with a smile, Are you two used to living here? The two women nodded, indicating that they were fine. Yan Yu stared at him, a little hesitant to speak. Yu Qianqiu felt a little itchy in his heart, but he deliberately avoided her gaze, all because he did not know what to say. Is that Yan Juexing really that dangerous? Enchantress of Charm asked in a rare solemn tone. Obviously, she also heard the conversation between Yu Qianqiu and Lu Yanqing. Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank, his eyes swept across the two's face, and slowly asked, Have you seen Yan Juexing in Lingfang Valley? The two shook their heads, and Enchantress of Charm replied, Other than walking around once when we first arrived, we have been following Senior Lu's side recently, and learned a lot of things. As for Yan Juexing, we have never seen him. But just now, when I heard you mention third brother Xian, I remembered something. Some time ago, he often said that he would bring us to the back mountain to have a look, but because we are women, it is not convenient for us to go with him to that remote place, so we refused. Now that I think about it, this matter is a little suspicious. Yu Qianqiu nodded, and immediately let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that his worry was right. Yan Juexing really wanted to make a move on the two women through third brother Xian. Fortunately, the two of them had always been by Lu Yanqing's side, and did not give Yan Juexing a chance to make a move, otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Although that guy was seriously injured by me and escaped, there are some things that need to be prepared in advance. Yu Qianqiu solemnly reminded, If you meet him, do not hold any hope, and immediately run as far as you can, especially when his eyes are glowing red. Especially when his eyes are glowing red, immediately avoid them. Do not look at them, or your mind will be controlled by him and you will become his puppet. The two women's faces changed, and they looked at each other with goosebumps. Enchantress of Charm asked again, Is Yan Juexing really that scary? That guy's devil art is very strange, I reckon that no cultivator below the soul-forming stage can be his opponent. Last night, he met me, so it was his bad luck. Yu Qianqiu reminded the two again, do not hold any hope, you did not see it with your own eyes, so you can't imagine how terrifying his devil art is. He was even able to come back to life and escape after being killed by me once. In short, you are definitely not his opponent. Third brother Xian and his senior brothers are all experts at the end of the tribulation passing stage, so you must learn from them. They can come back to life after dying? The two women were shocked by his words, and immediately paid attention to it, and immediately agreed. The three of them then stood at the edge of the flat platform, facing the rising sun as they chatted idly. The mountain path in the distance was shrouded by the rising mist, and they could vaguely see many people heading towards the Spirit Fang Valley. After Yu Qianqiu noticed, he stretched out his hand and pointed, and asked curiously, what are those people doing? Enchantress of Charm giggled, and explained, they are the poor people of the nearby countries, because Spirit Fang Valley can treat people for free, they all come to seek medical advice. Yu Qianqiu slightly frowned. At this time, Lu Yanqing walked out of the manor, and Enchantress of Charm and Yan Yu immediately bowed and greeted, Senior Lu. However, Yu Qianqiu pointed to the mountain path in the distance, and said to Lu Yanqing, Senior Lu, shouldn't you stop practicing medicine for a while? I'm afraid that the commotion here will shock the world. Okay. Lu Yanqing said in a daze, only then did she realize that there was no one to command her, and they had all gone into the mountains to find someone. After Yu Qianqiu glanced at them, he raised his eyebrows, turned to Enchantress of Charm and Yan Yu, and said, persuade the people who came to go back, and if you can't persuade them to go back, then directly show your skills and rush back. Think of a way to seal the mountain path, and set up a monument. Spirit Fang Valley has something important to do, and the valley will be sealed for a month. He did not need Lu Yanqing's consent, and directly helped her make the decision. Hearing this, the two women were speechless, thinking that this guy was too bold, and could not help but look at Lu Yanqing. Lu Yanqing looked at Yu Qianqiu, and seeing that he was so determined, she nodded. Only then did the two women quickly fly away. There were only two people left on the mountain plateau, and Yu Qianqiu indifferently stared at the woman beside him and asked, Senior Lu, how is the helper you found? Although he called her senior, there was no respect that should be given to a senior. Lu Yanqing was not in the mood to pay attention to this at this time, and her bright eyes swept over the empty Spirit Fang Valley. Her heart became more anxious, and she sighed softly, when Lan Feng has already brought people here, as for the others. I'm afraid they won't come for the time being. Yu Qianqiu was stunned, and felt that something was wrong. Could it be that those greedy people did not want to rob Yan Zhuixing of the peerless cultivation method? He said in surprise, could it be that something big happened in the cultivation world again? Lu Yanqing looked at him curiously, and her black eyebrows slightly furrowed. The opening of the East Holy Land is in the near future, and no one can be sure of the specific day. Maybe it will be a few days earlier, maybe it will be a few days later, anyway, it will definitely be within this month. At this time, no one wants to make any big movements, for fear of causing trouble for themselves, and many people have already rushed to the East Sea in advance, preparing to respectfully send Bai Changchun to the East Holy Land. Chapter 699. Yu Qianqiu was stunned on the spot. How could he forget such a big thing? For a long time, he had been worrying about a lot of things, but there was one place that he didn't need to worry about. That was naturally the demon ghost domains by Changchun. The old guy was so awesome that he didn't need to worry about him at all. Because he was used to not having to do anything, he really forgot. However, he had some doubts in his heart. The old guy was going to leave, why didn't he tell me? It shouldn't be. The two of them stopped talking. Lu Yanqing quietly looked at the unpredictable expression on his face. Suddenly, she remembered the scene of this guy pointing fingers at her. He was really impolite, not giving her any face at all. And she didn't know what happened to her, but she listened to him in a daze. A trace of anger flashed across Lu Yanqing's face. Then, she looked at Yu Qianqiu. She was angry, but she was also curious. This guy clearly had the biggest backing in the world, but he never revealed it. Otherwise, who in the cultivation world would dare to provoke him? How could he be chased everywhere? These two master and disciple were both strange people. Two figures flew back. The return of the 100-charm beauty and Yan Yu made the two of them come back to their senses. The 100-charm beauty looked at the two of them suspiciously. She seemed to have seen Lu Yanqing staring at Yu Qianqiu. This was nothing, but when she saw her and Yan Yu return, she looked away in a panic, giving people a feeling of guilt. Why did it feel a little ambiguous? Is everything done? Yu Qianqiu looked at the two women and asked. The 100-charm beauty smiled and said, yes. Yu Qianqiu paused, then suddenly cupped his hands towards Lu Yanqing and said, Senior Lu, I have something to do first. I will leave the two of them to you. Lu Yanqing nodded slightly. In her heart, she had already guessed where he was going. Yu Qianqiu then said to the two women, Here, you'd better not run around. It's safer to follow Senior Lu. After saying that, he turned around and was about to leave, but then he seemed to think of something. He looked at the alluring temptress and said, I have avenged Master Hao. You can rest assured. The 100-charm enchantress expression darkened, and she said softly, I've heard it from Senior Lu. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Lu Yanqing, then cupped his hands towards the few of them and said, Goodbye. By the time when Lan Feng arrived at the Spirit Fong Valley with thousands of people, Yu Qianqiu had already appeared in the ghostly domain. Although he could directly teleport to Obedient Island, he still pretended to fly towards it. The reason he came here was to find out when his master would leave so that he could make the necessary preparations. Leaping over the surface of the lake, he could already see the Obedient Island in the distance. As he neared, he suddenly saw a purple shadow shooting towards him. Yu Qianqiu didn't even need to guess to know who it was. Big liar. Ze chuckled and flashed to his side. She turned her head and asked, Why are you back? Yu Qianqiu was not interested in the way she addressed him. His face darkened, and he rolled his dead fish eyes. With a voice that could not be any lighter, he said disdainfully, It's none of your business. The reason why he lowered his voice was because he was worried about Nongzhu, who loved her daughter as much as her life. Ze immediately stopped smiling, and her pretty face turned cold. But Yu Qianqiu had already landed on the Obedient Island, standing face to face with Hibiscus, who was looking forward to seeing him. Miss Mu bowed to him. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to be so polite. He smiled at Hibiscus and said, I will go and greet Master first. Let's talk later. Okay. Hibiscus obediently replied and watched him walk towards the big house. Ze pulled her arm and said coldly, Hibiscus, ignore him. Hibiscus nodded with a smile like a flower. As soon as Yu Qianqiu walked into the big house, he saw Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged in the center with his eyes closed. Nongzhu was sitting on the right side of Bai Changchun. She stretched and yawned, Boy, you are back. I was going to look for you on behalf of your master. Master, Senior Nongzhu. Yu Qianqiu bowed and sat on the left side of Bai Changchun, which was opposite to Nongzhu. They stared at each other, waiting for Bai Changchun to speak. No one knew what Bai Changchun was thinking. The house was quiet. After a long time, Bai Changchun opened his eyes. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and asked, What is it that you came back for? Yu Qianqiu was in awe, but he pretended to be generous and said, This time, I came back because I have something to ask Master. He always remembered what Bai Changchun said after he killed He Li. Bai Changchun's evaluation of He Li was too polite. He remembered it when he saw Bai Changchun. Therefore, although he seemed to be respectful, he did not dare to be too polite. Before Bai Changchun opened his mouth, Nongzhu asked, What is it? Tell me about it. With a curious look on his face, he felt a little bored. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Bai Changchun. Seeing that the old man had no objection, he looked at Nongzhu and asked, Senior Nongzhu, do you remember Yan Juexing? Him. Nongzhu smiled disapprovingly and said, He is your sworn enemy. Both of you went from the cultivation world of Huaxia to the cornucopia. If you didn't make him famous, I wouldn't care who he is. Tilting his head to look at Bai Changchun, he explained, he's the new disciple of Bing Qingzi. I've told you about him before. He's the one who was forced by your disciple to hide all day long. How pitiful. He then turned his head to ask Yu Qianqiu, what's wrong? Are you fighting against each other again? Hasn't he been defeated by you all the time? Can't you defeat him? You even asked your master. You think too highly of him, don't you? What a joke. Who does he think he is? Why can't I defeat him? Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said disdainfully, I happened to meet him before I came here. I seriously injured him and chopped off one of his arms. Unfortunately, he escaped. You are so useless. You seriously injured him and chopped off one of his arms, but you let him escape. Nongzhu sat up straight and asked excitedly, it can't be so simple. What's going on? Tell me. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, I only know what devil art that fellow cultivates, and it's incomparably strange. Actually, before I injured him this time, I'd already killed him once. But the shocking thing is that he was actually able to come back to life after being turned into a dried corpse, and in the end, he escaped. Master, have you ever heard of such an evil skill? Come back to life? Nongzhu was shocked and looked at Bai Changchun inquiringly. Bai Changchun was also a little surprised. He thought for a while and said slowly, it's said that there is a skill that can bring people back to life after death. But I don't know what it is. But I don't believe that someone with a shallow cultivation who can defeat you can cultivate to the realm of resurrection. That realm is close to the divine sense. I'm afraid that even the masters in the immortal realm can't do that. It's really incredible. Nongzhu poked her head and asked weakly, Old Bai, why don't you catch that guy and kill him again? So that you can confirm it again? I can also see what kind of resurrection skill it is. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up and thought that it was a good idea. Bai Changchun glanced at them fiercely. They shrunk their heads and quickly extinguished their evil thoughts. They all knew that Bai Changchun was arrogant. As long as no one provoked him, he would not fight with such a junior. Unless Yan Juexing was a very powerful master who could make Bai Changchun have a strong desire to fight with him. But how could Bai Changchun take a fancy to a junior who could even defeat Yu Qianqiu? Nongzhu coughed awkwardly and changed the topic. She pointed at Yu Qianqiu and scolded, why are you looking at me like that? Maybe you were fooled by his camouflage. Yu Qianqiu was unhappy when he heard that. When he was about to refute, Nongzhu changed her words and said, but it is also possible that the guy's devil kung fu is magical. He doesn't have to have a high cultivation. Yes. That guy's evil skill is really evil. Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Changchun and nodded in agreement. Bai Changchun shook his head and said, evil skill? What could truly be called demonic arts were the cultivation methods of the demonic cultivators in the ancient times, which were even more ancient than the ancient times. But the devil realm has been sealed for countless years. Until now, I've never heard of anyone practicing evil skill. How could there be evil skill without any sign? The devil realm? Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu were stunned at the same time. Both of them were confused. Nongzhu asked suspiciously, isn't there only the immortal realm, the underworld, and the human realm? How come there is a devil realm and it's sealed? I've heard of even older legends. Why haven't I heard of the devil realm? I haven't heard of it before either. But when I took over the demon realm, the former torture envoy mentioned it. Bai Changchun sighed and said, it's a horrible existence. It once dominated the three realms and even the immortal realm and the underworld had to bow their heads to it. Later, the devil realm was sealed. The immortal realm and the underworld joined hands to eradicate the evil cultivators in the human realm. They would rather kill the wrong people than let them go. So no one dared to mention the word devil realm, for fear of being implicated. Over time, the legend about the devil realm disappeared in the human realm. The evil cultivators in the devil realm are so powerful? Nongzhu swallowed and said, why haven't I heard you mention it before? Bai Changchun glanced at Yu Qianqiu, who was in a daze. Nongju looked at him and immediately understood. It seemed that she had benefited from this guy. Bai Changchun mainly said it to him. Bai Changchun looked out of the door and said leisurely, in ancient times, evil cultivators wreaked havoc and formed their own way, which was called the Devil Realm. There was a top master of the Devil Realm who forcibly opened up a fourth realm apart from the immortal realm, the underworld and the human realm, which was called the Devil Realm. The cultivation of this top master of the Devil Realm was so powerful that it made the top masters of the immortal realm and the underworld tremble. In the end, he broke through the known peak of cultivation in the four realms and ascended to the legendary and illusory divine realm. This person was recognized as the first master of the Devil Realm since the beginning of the Devil Realm. He was called the Devil God by the later generations of the Devil Realm. Chapter 700. The Devil God. Nongju and Yu Qianqiu both murmured with fascination. A magnificent scene appeared in their minds, in which a peerless genius stood between heaven and earth. They couldn't see his face clearly, but the wind was blowing, the heroes were chasing after the deer, and the demons were dancing wildly, but he was the only one. Just think about it, during that era where experts were numerous like trees in a forest, how could a peerless genius who was able to look down upon all experts, shake the three dimensions with his might, and forcefully open up a world of his own? How could others not be fascinated by him? Bai Changchun continued slowly, it was also because he went to the divine realm that the Devil Realm lost its pillar. Many years later, the Devil Realm gradually declined, and finally the immortal realm and the underworld had the opportunity to raise their heads, which led to the fate of the Devil Realm being sealed. He sighed again and said, "It's a pity that we were not born at the right time, and couldn't see the peerless glory of the Devil God. If we could fight with him, we would die without regret." These words caused Nongju and Yu Qianqiu to look at each other and roll their eyes. They muttered in their hearts, "Old fellow, you're biting off more than you can chew. Although you're formidable, you're still far behind the Devil God. The Devil God is a master of the divine realm. With your cultivation, are you qualified to fight with him?" The room was quiet, and Bai Changchun still looked leisurely and fascinated. Yu Qianqiu secretly glanced at him, and quietly counted his fingers repeatedly. As a disciple, it was not appropriate for him to criticize his master for reaching beyond his grasp. Nongju suddenly coughed and smiled awkwardly. "Old Bai, the times are different, and each has its own talent. Speaking of which, as the first master in the world, your status in the cultivation world is no different from that of the Devil God. Many people admire you, so why do you admire the ancients? Haha. It's a little unrealistic, let's think about the present and the future." Bai Changchun shook his head slightly and said firmly, "After learning the legend of the Devil God from the former torture envoy, I often look up to the vast sky and have a goal to strive for in my life. I look forward to one day learning from the Devil God, so that my cultivation will not be in vain. Maybe you think I'm a little ambitious, but I think it's not impossible, because the great way is endless." The scope of the old man's goal was too great. Yu Qianqiu's eyes were focused on his nose was focused on his heart, his eyes were focused, he counted on his fingers without saying a word. Nongju couldn't help but murmur, "You won't be able to see the Devil God. Wait until you see the demonic monarch, the immortal emperor, and the emperor of hell." I remember now. Yu Qianqiu suddenly raised his head and said, "Yan Zhuixing is related to the 10,000 demons, the number one sect in China's cultivation world. His father, Yan Bugui, is from the 10,000 demons, and his grandfather was the previous sect leader of the 10,000 demons. Master, do you think that the 10,000 demons are related to the ancient Devil Dao? These are two completely unrelated matters." Bai Changchun said indifferently, "The current Devil Dao and the ancient Devil Dao are not the same thing. The real Devil Dao is quite complicated. Human, ghost, and demon can all be classified as Devil Dao. The reason why there were devil cultivators in ancient times is that after the world was created, those pioneers of cultivation had no standard cultivation methods. In order to survive in the savage and dangerous era, they had no choice but to create all kinds of cultivation techniques. Because they were pioneers of cultivation, no one gave them advice on how to avoid risks. Therefore, many people, demons, and ghosts went astray and became possessed by the devil. These people, demons, and ghosts who went astray and became possessed by the devil were collectively called devil cultivators. They were the pioneers of the devil Tao. Among them, there were many peerless talents, and the devil god was the best. How could the current devil Tao and the 10,000 demons compare to them? So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu suddenly realized. Nongzhu clicked her tongue and said, I didn't expect that a group of people who went astray could suppress the people of the immortal world and the underworld. That's really amazing. Bai Changchun stared at him and snorted, even if they went astray and became possessed by the devil, do you think those who can create their own cultivation methods are ordinary people? Which one of them is not a peerless talent with a mind and talent beyond ordinary people? Because of the danger in the wild, except for those big tribes, many people live in a precarious state at any time. The cultivation methods created by these people are all aimed at quick success, bloodshed, brutality, killing, and great power. In order to save their lives, there is nothing they don't dare to do. After all, the devil Tao is also forced out. Nongzhu nodded slowly and sighed, yes. It was only in that kind of precarious living environment that so many amazing talents could be produced. If it were now, who would dare to risk their lives to practice at random? There is no ready-made cultivation method to practice properly. Now I finally understand why countless amazing legends that can't be replicated always appear in that ancient and dangerous wild era. I couldn't figure it out before, but it turns out that they are all forced out. Respectable. What a group of people. No wonder they can suppress the immortal world and the underworld. Yu Qianqiu also nodded silently. If a person wasn't forced into a dead end, how many of them would risk their lives and take a risk out of desperation? This is similar to the saying in his previous life that heroes are born in troubled times. In a peaceful environment, there are not so many heroes. Bai Changchun looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was silent, and asked, You came to me to ask about this? Yu Qianqiu suddenly came back to his senses. Seeing that his master and Nongzhu were staring at him, he scratched his head and said with an embarrassed smile, I heard that the Eastern Holy Land is about to open, so I came back to ask Master if you really want to go there. Yes. Bai Changchun nodded indifferently and said, I have contacted Ancestor Nanming of Xian Island. In a few days, I will go to Xian Island to settle down temporarily and wait for the East Holy Land to open. Nongzhu's expression also became solemn. She stared at Yu Qianqiu and interrupted, Your master was about to ask me to call you back to talk about this. I didn't expect you to come back in advance. It saves me the trouble of looking for you everywhere. Yu Qianqiu asked weakly, Master, can't I not go? He knew clearly that once Bai Changchun left, his life would not be so good. Nongzhu nodded in agreement and said, Yes. Old Bai, think about it again. In any case, your current physical body has already extended your lifespan by another 200 years. With these 200 years, with your aptitude, it's not impossible for you to break through again. Why do you want to go to that place of no return? Isn't it pretty good here? As she said, she raised her hand and pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said, Once you leave, this guy will be in big trouble. He has offended so many people. There are a lot of people who want to kill him. Yu Qianqiu nodded honestly and said, Yes. Yes. Nongzhu, you worry too much. Bai Changchun said calmly, Even if you and I are killed, it is not certain that anyone can kill him. Yu Qianqiu was stunned and then said with a bitter smile, Master, aren't you mocking me? Nongzhu looked up and down at Yu Qianqiu as if she was looking at a monster. She knew that Bai Changchun would not lie. There must be a reason for him to say such a thing. Bai Changchun said indifferently, I heard from Nongzhu that when you were expelled from Anquangsung, you had a close relationship with a white fox who had been cultivating for 1,000 years. You also wrote several songs for her. Is that true? Nongzhu was a little confused. When she knew that Yu Qianqiu, the scum of the cultivation world, was accepted as a disciple by Bai Changchun, she told Bai Changchun about the story of this scum of the cultivation world. It had been a long time. She didn't know why Bai Changchun brought it up again. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He also didn't know why Bai Changchun asked this question. He thought it was not a secret, so he nodded and admitted it. That's right, Bai Changchun stared at Yu Qianqiu and said, I'll tell you one thing, and you'll understand. Many years ago, I comprehended a set of incantations somewhere in the cultivation world of Huaxia. I accidentally hit a treasure from a deep mountain. After I carefully examined it, I understood what it was. For this thing to fall into my hands, it might be the will of the heavens that it belongs to me. When I was hesitating whether to rely on myself or the treasure, a white fox who had been cultivating for 1,000 years suddenly rushed in. Maybe it was attracted by the movement of my cultivation. Looking back on my life of cultivation, I always relied on myself. There was no need to rely on treasures. At that time, I made up my mind to abandon the treasure and watched it be taken away by the white fox. When I accepted you as a disciple, I was just curious about your abnormality. I wanted to explore it slowly. Later, combined with the relationship between you and the white fox that Nongzhu told me, I immediately guessed that the thing in the white fox's hands was in your hands. If this isn't God's will, then what is? I didn't expect that the thing that I didn't want would come to me in a roundabout way. Moreover, it appeared at the right time. Yu Qianqiu, do you understand what I'm talking about now? Nongzhu was confused. She interrupted first and said, What are you talking about? Bai Changchun's words were very obvious. How could Yu Qianqiu not know what he was talking about? He was naturally referring to the golden bead. He was a little dumbfounded. It seemed that the old man already knew that he had the golden bead. From what he said, he seemed to know the use of the golden bead. Master. I really didn't mean to hide it. Yu Qianqiu immediately got up and knelt down. He was a little panicked. This old man couldn't tolerate sand in his eyes. He was even prepared to run away. Bai Changchun waved his hand and said, This thing is extraordinary. It's right not to say it. Don't mention it to anyone in the future. You will need it for many things in the future. I can also go to the Eastern Holy Land with peace of mind because of it. If the heavens have feelings, the heavens will also grow old. This is God's will. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's beating heart finally calmed down. He then asked suspiciously, Master, what is this thing called? What are its uses? Bai Changchun was stunned. He stared deeply at Yu Qianqiu for a while and said slowly, Since you don't know, then don't ask anymore. When the time comes, you will naturally know. This is God's will. You don't need to ask anyone. Do you understand? Chapter 701. It would be strange if he could understand it. Yu Qianqiu answered submissively. In fact, he hated it when people talked about God's will. If so, he deserved to be killed by lightning in his previous life. He was depressed at the thought of it. However, it was strange that the golden bead that Bai Suzhen gave him belonged to Bai Changchun. After it fell into his hands, he became Bai Changchun's disciple. It was really a big circle. Nongzhu felt that she had missed something wonderful. She asked anxiously, What treasure are you talking about? Tell me about it. Bai Changchun glanced at her and said, Don't ask about things that you shouldn't know. Nongzhu's face fell immediately. She said in a muffled voice, Old Bai, you are not a good friend. Why are you still hiding it from me when you've already said so much? Bai Changchun ignored her and said quietly, After I leave, the demon realm needs the next torture envoy. Hearing this, the room suddenly became quiet. Yu Qianqiu began to count his fingers again. To be honest, he was not interested in the torture envoy of the demon realm at all. It seemed that the responsibility was more important than the benefits. Nongzhu was no longer angry. She turned her head casually and looked out of the door. She murmured, The weather outside seems good, Yu Qianqiu. From today on, I will hand over the demon realm to you. Bai Changchun said bluntly, without any beating around the bush. Nongzhu was stunned for a moment, and then let out a sigh of relief. She cupped one hand in the other before her chest to Yu Qianqiu, whose face was full of astonishment, and jokingly said, "Yu Qianqiu, congratulations. Congratulations on finally becoming the world-famous torture master of the demon region." Yu Qianqiu came to himself and waved his hands repeatedly. "Master, I can't do it. I really can't do it. You'd better give it to someone else." Bai Changchun said with a blank face, "Oh, who do you think is suitable?" "Him." Yu Qianqiu pointed at Nongzhu without hesitation. There were only 3 people here. If he did not drag Nongzhu down with him, who else would he drag? Yu Qianqiu said eloquently, "Senior Nongzhu's cultivation is higher than mine, and she has many friends in the cultivation world. If there is any trouble, she can find many people to help her. I can't do that. I have a lot of enemies to begin with, and I have a lot of problems to deal with. I don't have the time to manage the devil domain. The burden is too heavy for me to bear." "Bullshit." Nongzhu immediately jumped up, pointed at Yu Qianqiu's nose and scolded, "Don't involve me in the matter between you two, or don't blame me for being rude." Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth. If it wasn't for Bai Changchun, he would have scolded him back. Bai Changchun gently waved his hand and said, "Nongzhu, you go out first. I need to talk to him alone." Nongzhu rolled her eyes and sat down. She said with a smile, "Old Bai, you really have a lot of secrets. What secrets do you have? Let me listen to them. I promise I won't disturb you too. I'll only bring my ears and not my mouth." You change your face faster than turning the page of a book. What a fickle villain. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the mulberry tree and scolded the locust tree. Nongzhu's expression didn't change. She kept her mouth shut and let him scold her with a smile. She had entered the state of only bringing her ears and not her mouth. Who would have thought that Bai Changchun would only say a few words, and he would immediately flee in defeat? Bai Changchun said, "Some secrets can only be told to the next torture envoy of the devil domain. If you really want to hear it, I'll take it that you agree to be the next torture envoy." Watching Nongzhu leave, Yu Qianqiu suddenly became listless. Bai Changchun waved his hand, and the soundproof bounded domain was instantly formed. Nongzhu wandered outside the room for a while. She knew that it was impossible for her to eavesdrop under Bai Changchun's nose with her cultivation. She waved her hand and walked out. But when she saw Ze chatting with Hibiscus by the 1,000-mile lake, she suddenly became worried. Although she didn't want to be the torture envoy of the devil domain, for Ziyi's sake, she didn't want Yu Qianqiu to be the torture envoy. If the news that Yu Qianqiu was in charge of the devil domain was spread out, the devil domain would definitely become the target of public criticism. Because Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was too weak to deter those with ulterior motives. The vast devil domain would probably become a hot spot for all forces to compete for. Yu Qianqiu's fate was worrying. Without Bai Changchun's deterrence, those experts at the late stage of Huashan realm would be like wild horses running wild in the cultivation world. Few people in the world could restrain them. Nongzhu admitted that she couldn't stop them with her cultivation. The only way was to ask Wen Lanfeng to take charge, but this was not a long-term solution. What was Bai Changchun thinking? He actually dared to give such a heavy responsibility of the devil domain to Yu Qianqiu. Wasn't he afraid that Yu Qianqiu would mess it up and even lose his life? This was simply harming him. Nongzhu shook her head in confusion, but then she remembered what Bai Changchun said before. Did Yu Qianqiu really have a life-saving magic weapon? Logically speaking, Bai Changchun was not a person who made rash decisions. There must be a reason for him to do so. Thinking of this, Nongzhu was more or less confident. Even so, he kept walking around the island, anxiously waiting for the result of the conversation between the master and the disciple in the center of the island. He hoped that the conversation between the master and the disciple would break down and Bai Changchun would not leave. That would be the best result. It should be known that once Bai Changchun left, the world would be in chaos. The sun went from high in the sky to the west, and then from the west to the night. Until the night was full of stars and the bright moon was in the sky, there was no movement in the room. Nongzhu didn't know what the master and the disciple were talking about for such a long time. Furong and Ze were also a little impatient. They asked Nongju several times, but Nongju just answered perfunctorily. So the two girls returned to the lake, back to back, and stayed up for the night. When the sun shone from the east again, the conversation between the master and the disciple in the room came to an end. Yu Qianqiu didn't know when he moved to the opposite side of Bai Changchun. The master and the disciple talked face to face for nearly a whole day. Yu Qianqiu sat quietly in the same place, digesting the secrets that belonged to the former torturers. Bai Changchun said a lot during the day's conversation, and Yu Qianqiu also asked a lot of questions. Bai Changchun answered all his questions. The more he knew, the more serious Yu Qianqiu looked. He didn't expect that the devil domain had so many secrets. That's right, master. Yu Qianqiu suddenly raised his head and said, "There's something I forgot to ask, master. I once followed the flame eye of Twilight Valley's blue fire underground and saw a few inconceivable things." Bai Changchun froze. There's something under the flame eye of the blue fire? What did you see? Even master doesn't know? Yu Qianqiu found this rather strange, and then he gestured with his hand. Below that is a massive underground space flowing with lava. It's an extremely spectacular sight. Several massive blue lotuses grew on the river of lava, and Twilight Valley's blue fire came from these lotuses. Most inconceivable of all was that there was a naked child sleeping on one of the lotuses, not the slightest bit afraid of the blue fire. Bai Changchun stroked his beard and said, "You mean to say that the child was sleeping naked in the blue fire?" "Yes. There's something even more inconceivable than that." Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue. "At the time, I struck the child awake, but who knew that the child would jump straight into the roiling lava as if he were swimming in a river? Because I struck him, the child dived into the lava and found a helper. The helper he found was too frightening. It was a savage, majestic, and dignified dragon. Damn, this is the first time in my life that I've seen a living dragon." "A dragon?" Bai Changchun suddenly stood up and gravely asked, "Are you sure you didn't see wrong? It really was a dragon?" Yu Qianqiu also stood up and gestured at the dragon's appearance. It should have been a dragon, and a red one at that. Its entire body was covered in bright red scales, and I could sense a majestic and ancient aura the moment it appeared. But strangely, I seemed to see that the dragon's claws were locked down by dazzling golden chains, and the chains seemed to be connected to the bottom of the lava. I don't know if I saw wrong, but who would have the ability to lock down a dragon? I was scared out of my wits and didn't dare to look further, so I used the miraculous effect of the golden bead to escape. After gesturing, Yu Qianqiu asked again, "Master, didn't you say that the dragon mount of the Myriad Swords Demon Lord was red? Could that dragon be the one that belonged to the Myriad Swords Demon Lord?" Bai Changchun pondered for a while, and slowly nodded. "It should be. I didn't expect the legend to be true." He then turned to Yu Qianqiu and explained, "The previous torture envoy mentioned it once. If you hadn't mentioned it, I would have forgotten about it. Regarding that dragon, there are two theories. The premise is that the Myriad Swords Demon Lord was severely injured. The first theory is that the Myriad Swords Demon Lord knew that he couldn't hold on any longer, so he gave the dragon its freedom, and the dragon soared into the sky. This matter was too mysterious." Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but ask, could the second theory be that the dragon was locked underground? The second theory doesn't make sense. Otherwise, the first torture envoy who knew what happened would know where the dragon was, unless he deliberately kept it a secret. Now it seems that he must have witnessed what happened with his own eyes, but he deliberately hid it and passed it down as a legend. Bai Changchun explained, "This theory is also because the Myriad Swords Demon Lord knew that he couldn't hold on any longer, so he was afraid that the dragon would avenge him on impulse. He knew that the dragon was no match for him, so he locked it deep underground. At the same time, he told the dragon that retribution is inevitable. When someone has the ability to break the shackles he placed on the dragon and release it, that person will be the fated person who has the ability to avenge the Myriad Swords Demon Lord. The dragon will then come out and help the fated person to avenge the Myriad Swords Demon Lord. That doesn't make sense." Yu Qianqiu rubbed his chin and raised his eyebrows. How could others know about the conversation between the Myriad Swords Demon Lord and the dragon? Those who knew about it were either there at the time, or the myriad swords demon lord passed on the message. The former is more likely. Otherwise, the myriad swords demon lord would have no reason to tell others about the agreement between him and the dragon. There's no need to speculate anymore. Bai Changchun sighed. Since you've already seen the dragon underground, it means that the second theory is true. I didn't expect that. The dragon has always been underground in the demon domain, keeping its promise with the myriad swords demon lord and waiting for the fated person. I really don't know how it survived such a long time. Chapter 702. On the side, Yu Qianqiu sighed endlessly. Divine dragons were locked underground not for hundreds or thousands of years, but for tens of thousands of years at every turn. Who could say for sure how many years had passed since the ancient times, but it was probably more than 100,000 years. It was terrifying to think about being locked up for so many years. Just as he was shaking his head with his master, Yu Qianqiu's eyes suddenly lit up, and he said excitedly, "Master, why don't we think of a way to release the divine dragon? Think about it. We're both abiding by the agreement with the demon lord of 10,000 swords, so we should be on the same side. A divine dragon, a god-tier expert. With a divine dragon guarding the devil domain, who in the world would dare to do anything to the devil domain, he. The more he spoke, the more excited he became. Even he admired his own cleverness for coming up with such a good idea. He couldn't help but laugh sinisterly. Bai Changchun looked at him speechlessly. It was hard to associate his disciple's expression with that of a good person. He then said coldly, "It's true that the divine dragon's cultivation is high, but don't misunderstand. The divine dragon is also a member of the divine beasts. Just because it has the word divine, doesn't mean it's a god-tier expert." Yu Qianqiu's sinister laughter stopped abruptly, and his expression twitched. "Master, you mean that the divine dragon isn't necessarily very powerful?" Bai Changchun nodded. "It's not that it's not powerful, but the so-called divine beasts are beasts with supernatural powers. They have innate advantages that other beasts can't compare to. After cultivation, they all have the possibility of reaching the god tier. As for other beasts, it's not so easy to reach the god tier. The divine dragon's cultivation definitely hasn't reached the god tier. You should know that the demon lord of 10,000 swords didn't even reach the god tier when he died. Think about it, how could he control a god-tier dragon? If the divine dragon really reached the god tier, the demon lord of 10,000 swords wouldn't have died with the divine dragon protecting him. Even with the myriad swords demon monarch's cultivation, he wouldn't be able to trap the divine dragon underground for so many years. I'm afraid that the divine dragon has already broken free from its shackles and escaped. Even if its cultivation hasn't reached the god level, it's probably many times stronger than the experts in the cultivation world, right?" Yu Qianqiu said weakly. Judging from his tone, he seemed to be unwilling to give up. It seemed like he really wanted to get a divine dragon to protect him. Bai Changchun nodded slightly and said, "The masters of the cultivation world definitely can't be compared to the divine dragon. Although the divine dragon is not a match for the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld, it is still qualified to fight against them. Think about it, how can the masters of the cultivation world be compared to it? At least my current cultivation is definitely not comparable to the divine dragon. Then isn't it just right to let it out to guard the demon region?" Yu Qianqiu finally couldn't help but voice his desire. At this time, his mind was not thinking about letting the dragon god protect the devil's domain. Instead, he was thinking about building a relationship with the dragon god. When the time came, he would have the final say in the cultivation world. He could do whatever he wanted and he would not have to work so hard anymore. "I advise you to give up on this idea." Bai Changchun stared at him coldly and said in a deep voice, "The world is full of changes. The dragon god has been detained for so many years. No one knows what it is thinking now. Can you guarantee that it will be a good thing if it is released? Once its bestial nature is unleashed, it will definitely bring disaster to the whole world. When that time comes, who can control it? Can you control it?" This must be one of the reasons why the demon Lord of Swords detained it. Moreover, the shackles that the demon Lord of Swords set on the dragon god cannot be broken with the dragon god's cultivation. Do you think that the two of us can break it with our cultivation? Hee. I was just saying it casually. If it doesn't work, then forget it. Hee. Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. He was also shocked when he thought of the scene of the red guy roaring to the world and going berserk. He was just thinking of using the gold technique that he cultivated to try and break the shackles of the dragon god. Now it seemed that it was better to let the dragon continue to stay underground. He did not want to go for wool and come home shorn. When the time came, he would not be able to help but become a scourge instead. I have told you everything that needs to be said. If there is nothing else. Bai Changchun looked out the door slowly and sighed leisurely. Then. My mission is completed. It is time to go. He had always been calm, but now his words were filled with complicated emotions. Yu Qianqiu closed his lips tightly and looked at his master who was sighing. He was a little speechless. No matter how cold-hearted his master was, leaving this place where he had stayed for thousands of years would be a little emotional. According to his master, he was the one who had been in charge of the demon region for the longest time among all the torturers. Moreover, his master was not a cold-hearted person. He was just a warm person on the inside and cold on the outside. Yu Qianqiu slowly lowered his head and said with a trembling voice, "Master, why don't you not leave? I'm afraid I can't handle it alone. In fact, I wanted to leave 300 years ago. Unfortunately, I haven't found a suitable person to take charge of the demon region. That's why it has been delayed until now." Bai Changchun showed a rare smile and said with a faint smile, "Now it is time to leave. I believe you can do it well. Even if you can't do it well, there must be a reason for this." Yu Qianqiu looked up and said, "Master, don't you think Senior Wen Lanfeng is more suitable to take charge of the demon region? He is not a bad person. No one in the cultivation world is his match except for you. I want someone who can shoulder a heavy burden, not a good person. If a good person can solve the problem, there are many better people in the world. Why do I need to find him?" Bai Changchun snorted and said, "Even if you didn't appear, Wen Lanfeng would at most be my second choice. I spared his life twice just in case. If there is no other way, I will let him take charge of the demon region." Yu Qianqiu was stunned and could not help asking, "Why?" Bai Changchun showed an air of arrogance and said, "Wen Lanfeng, this person's cultivation talent is indeed good compared to others. In terms of cultivation, he is indeed suitable to take charge of the demon region. But this person is decisive. A woman can make him dizzy. He has a gentle personality and lacks ruthlessness in handling things. As a person who controls the overall situation, these are his fatal weaknesses. If he takes charge of the demon region, he will be used by people with ulterior motives sooner or later. If I really entrust the demon region to him, I am afraid I will first have to massacre all the soul formation masters in the world before I can be more or less relieved. But even so, it is not a long-term solution. A fatal weakness is a fatal weakness, and it is difficult to change. If I kill this group of people who can use him, there will be another group of people who can use him. I can't kill everyone in the world for the demon region, right?" As he said this, he looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, "But you are different. I have been silently observing you for a long time. On the surface, you do things by hook or by crook to achieve your goals. You are even cruel and merciless, but you always have a kind heart. This prevents you from being unable to control your ambition and becoming an ambitious person. A person who controls the overall situation can't be soft-hearted. You should be decisive when things happen. Thunder and blood are all means, not results, so you must know right from wrong, good from evil, and right from wrong. In this regard, you are more suitable to take charge of the demon region than Nongzhu. As for other reasons, I will not say." "Damn it. Is this a compliment or a scolding?" Yu Qianqiu touched his nose awkwardly and quickly changed the topic. "Then who is the first candidate? Is it Senior Nongzhu?" Yes, not only did the former punishment commissioner take a fancy to him, but so did I. Bai Changchun snorted and said, I wanted Nongzhu to take over, but this guy has been running away. For this reason, he even suppressed his cultivation and did not break through to the late stage of soul formation. He really wants to live a carefree life. Don't look down on Nongzhu. Nongzhu's talent for cultivation is not worse than Wen Lanfeng's, and it is even better. He only suppressed his cultivation and did not break through to prevent me from finding a reason to let him take over as the punishment commissioner. Does he think that I can't see through him? I guess after I leave, even if it is to protect himself, he will not take long to break through to the late stage of soul formation. That's good. You can have a helper. Damn it. You win. Yu Qianqiu hated Nongzhu very much. In order to escape responsibility, he even suppressed his cultivation and did not break through. Damn it. You set me up. No, I can't let him take advantage of me. Master. After careful consideration, I think Senior Nongzhu is more suitable to take charge of the demon region. Then he patted his chest and promised, Master, don't worry. Leave it to me. I have a way to make him accept the position of punishment commissioner. I will go to him now. No need. Bai Changchun stopped him coldly and looked outside the door. He said expressionlessly, he is destined to have a relationship with the demon region in this life. No matter how far he runs, he has to come back. Then he stared at Yu Qianqiu and said, Isn't it good to have a master at the late stage of soul formation to run errands for you? Yu Qianqiu felt wronged and said, That guy is very cunning. He often goes against me now. Once he breaks through to the late stage of soul formation, how can I order him around? You don't have to worry about that. Even if he pretends to be stupid, there will be someone who can order him around. Bai Changchun snorted and said, Does he think that he can live freely for the rest of his life without being in charge of the demon region? What a joke. What you owe me, you better pay me back. Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Changchun suspiciously. It was the first time that he heard Bai Changchun say something like this. He seemed to smell a trace of conspiracy. He had a premonition that Nongzhu's life in the future would not be so easy. The old guy had obviously dug a trap for Nongzhu. A trap dug by the world's top master. Damn it. She would definitely be killed. Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed when he thought that Nongzhu would be in trouble. But when he thought that he would have to shoulder more responsibilities, he couldn't be happy anymore. What a bitter life. Seeing his bitter face, Bai Changchun put down his hands behind his back and stretched out one hand. He opened his palm and showed a bunch of silver balls. He said calmly, If these things really have the effect you said, you can come to me if you really have any trouble that you can't solve. Of course, the premise is that I am still alive. Chapter 703. Haha. Master is the #1 expert in the world. No matter how mysterious the East Holy Land is, it's still in this world. Who can hurt Master? If there's any trouble, I'll definitely come to you. Yu Qianqiu answered bluntly, his face smiling like a chrysanthemum. Since Bai Changchun already knew about the golden bead, Yu Qianqiu also tactfully told Bai Changchun about the space of the golden bead and gave him a lot of silver beads. His original idea was to take advantage of Bai Changchun's convenience to go to the East Holy Land and find a chance to gain experience there. How could he forget that he could still invite this great master back if there was any trouble? My trump card is still there, I'm not afraid. The happy Yu Qianqiu was already imagining. If some people really went too far, when he invited Bai Changchun back, my God. That scene will definitely be very exciting, sweetheart. This guy was actually secretly looking forward to someone coming to the demon region to find trouble. But he was more or less worried that something would happen to Bai Changchun in the East Holy Land. The evil smile on his face betrayed his thoughts. Seeing him like this, Bai Changchun's face turned cold and he said in a low voice, Don't come to me if you can solve the problem yourself. Go out and call Ze here. I have something to talk to her alone. Seeing that the old guy was angry, Yu Qianzhou's heart trembled and his smile froze. He nodded and bowed and hurriedly ran out. Once out of the big house, his steps became leisurely again, and he walked calmly to the side of the 1,000 Miles Lake. The few people by the lake all noticed him and flashed over. Looking at his proud face, they didn't know what treasure he had picked up. Nongzhu touched her chin and was puzzled. Previously, in order to refuse the position of torture envoy, this guy fought with her so fiercely. Why did he look so relaxed now? Could it be that this cunning guy got rid of the position? Her man finally came out. Furong's eyes were smiling, more beautiful than the crescent moon at night. Ze asked with an envious face, Yu Qianzhou, senior Bai talked to you alone for such a long time. Did he teach you something good again? She knew that Bai Changchun had always treated people coldly and was a man of few words. It was simply unheard of for him to talk through the night like this. Yu Qianzhou acted like a vile person who had the upper hand. He pointed at Ziyi's beautiful nose and said, "My master has something to say to you in private. Hurry up, don't make my master unhappy." Ah! Ziyi's mouth was wide open. She had never spoken to Elder Bai alone before, and now he actually summoned her. Ziyi was excited and nervous at the same time. She was at a loss of what to do. She stammered, "Really? Oh. I'll go now." Nongzhu rolled her eyes and looked at Ziyi hurriedly rushing to the big house and respectfully entering the door. Why was Ziyi's words more effective than her own master's? Yu Qianzhou strolled to the lakeside and began to do some broadcasted gymnastics exercises. He looked at the vast demon domain in the distance and was in a good mood. From today onwards, this is my territory. Nongzhu and Furong looked at each other. Then Nongzhu flashed over and pretended to accompany him to do chest stretching exercises. She asked casually, "That Yu Qianzhou? Why did your master call Zi in?" Without turning his head, Yu Qianzhou said, "How would I know? You can ask Zi later." Being rejected, Nongzhu was not angry. She said, "What did you say to old Bai? Why did you take so long to speak? What did they say? Tell me, and I'll see if I can give you some advice." Yu Qianzhou withdrew his arm and turned around to look at her. He asked, "Do you really want to know?" Nongzhu looked back at the direction of the big house guiltily and said in a low voice, "Don't worry. I just want to listen and give you some advice. I won't tell anyone. If you don't believe me, I can swear." Yu Qianzhou snorted and stared at him and said with a cold smile, "You're also too despicable. My master said that he had found out long ago that you suppressed your cultivation and didn't break through in order to avoid being a torture master. You are so boring. If you don't want to be a torture master, just give up. Why do you have to play tricks with your old friend? Touch your own conscience and tell me, how can you feel at ease?" The wind was blowing by the lake, and Nongzhu's heart was a little cold. Bai Changchun had found out long ago, but he didn't mention it. What was he up to? Thinking of Bai Changchun's means, every time he talked to her, he looked at her with a sneer in his heart. Nongzhu immediately shivered. Based on his character, he was really tolerant of her for so many years and didn't punish her. Nongzhu felt lucky and thanked Bai Changchun for his generosity, but she felt that something was wrong. She looked at the direction of the big house guiltily again and asked in a low voice, "Yu Qianzhou, don't fool me. You can't talk about me for so long, can you? What else? You know, there are some words that can't be said to you." Yu Qianzhou left after saying that and went to flirt with Furong. Nongzhu pulled a long face. Not long after, Zi came out. She had a serious expression on her face. She walked over and looked at Yu Qianzhou firmly, as if saying, "I will support you." Yu Qianzhou was confused and didn't know what Bai Changchun had said to her. Nongzhu immediately went over with a smile and asked, "My dear apprentice, what did Senior Bai say to you? Come on, tell me, so that I can give you some advice." Ziyi's firm eyes softened and she pouted her mouth in grievance. "Master, I promised Senior Bai that I wouldn't tell anyone. Don't force me, okay? Nongju's face was completely dark. The muscles on her face twitched for a while, but she still squeezed out a smile and said, haha. Don't be angry, Ze. I won't force you. In fact, behind the smile, two tightly clenched fists were making a muffled sound. Yu Qianqiu, that brat, did not say anything, but even his own disciple did not pay attention to him. However, he dared to wrong anyone, but he could not bear to wrong Ze. Thus, he could only let himself be wronged and sulk. Seeing this scene, Yu Qianqiu turned around and smiled, like a fox that had stolen a chicken. He was happy to see Nongju being defeated. Nongju. By Changchun's voice, Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and saw that Bai Changchun had appeared here at some point in time. The expressions of the juniors became respectful. Nongju said with a gloomy face, "What's the matter?" Bai Changchun stared at him with a faint smile and said slowly, "We have known each other for many years. From today on, I'm afraid we have to separate." There was a touch of nostalgia in his tone. It was not easy to hear such a tone from Bai Changchun's mouth. Nongju was stunned, and his face returned to normal in an instant. All his anger disappeared. Of course, he knew what Bai Changchun's words meant. He was really going to leave for the place that he had never returned from since ancient times. The world's most powerful master for more than 1,000 years, the old friend that he had known for many years, was bidding farewell to him. The past was still vivid in his mind. Thinking back to the time when he traveled through space and time, the originally blurry memories and the things that he usually couldn't even remember suddenly appeared in front of his eyes as if it was only yesterday. He remembered that he had tricked him to come to the demon ghost region, but he had restrained the world's most powerful master for 1,000 years. He had shouldered the burden that belonged to him. He had let him down. He owed it to him. Senior Bai. Ze whimpered. Her eyes were red, and big drops of tears fell down. Her shoulders trembled, and she covered her mouth as she sobbed. She looked at the world's most powerful master with tears in her eyes. She thought about the place he was going to and that she would never see him again. She couldn't control her emotions. Although she had heard that Senior Bai would go to the East Holy Land one day, she didn't expect it to be so soon. Senior Bai had just told her personally. Furong was shocked. She didn't know what was going to happen, but she suddenly realized that the atmosphere was not right. Ze was crying, and there was a sense of separation between them. Nongju's lips were tightly shut, and she turned to look at the crying Ze. Obviously, she already knew. He put his hand on Ziyi's shoulder, stared at Bai Changchun, and said with a smile, "Old Bai, you." His voice was a little hoarse, and his throat was a little dry. He couldn't finish his words, and his face tightened. Yu Qianqiu, who knew what was going on, didn't feel anything, but the atmosphere made him feel uncomfortable. He stood at the side and scratched his head. Suddenly, he saw Furong's bewildered expression. He immediately pushed Furong lightly and said, "Master has always favored you. Quickly kowtow to Master." Furong's expression became more and more confused. She didn't know why she had to kowtow for no reason. However, she always listened to Yu Qianqiu's words unconditionally. She immediately knelt down and kowtowed to Bai Changchun. After 3 kowtows, Bai Changchun waved his hand, and Furong couldn't continue kowtowing anymore. She was lifted up by a gentle airflow without any resistance. Hibiscus looked at Yu Qianqiu as if she wanted to say something. Yu Qianqiu smiled at her, indicating that it was fine. Nongju, Shuntian Island might not be peaceful during this period of time. Bring Furong and Ze to the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest for the time being. As for the rest, Yu Qianqiu will naturally arrange it. Bai Changchun said with a faint smile. Furong looked at Yu Qianqiu again, and revealed a puzzled expression, as if asking, "Why do you want me to leave?" Yu Qianqiu gave her a look, indicating that she should listen to him. Furong immediately didn't have any objections. "Old Bai, there's no need to be so anxious." Nongju looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, "If I leave, what will happen to him?" Leave now, don't make me say more. Bai Changchun looked at the boundless 1,000-mile lake, and nodded slightly as he looked around. His usually cold face actually maintained a faint smile. Occasionally, a trace of reluctance and longing could be seen in his moving eyes, but it disappeared in a flash. After looking around, his expression suddenly became resolute, and his eyes suddenly looked towards the east. His bright and spirited eyes revealed an unswerving determination to pursue. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.